The multiverse is a tapestry of infinite realities, each with its own immutable laws. But what happens when a thread from one universe tears through into another, bringing power that shouldn't exist? When gods tremble and ancient empires fall before a force they cannot comprehend, the answer is written in blood and fire across 1,000 worlds. In the Stargate universe, power comes in many forms. The Goa'uld wield technology so advanced it masquerades as divinity. The ancients ascended beyond physical form through enlightenment. The Asgard command fleets that bend the fabric of space itself. But on this day, a new power would enter their galaxy. One that requires no ships, no armies, and no mercy. A power forged in the fires of hell itself, baptized in demon blood, and driven by rage so pure it transcends dimensions. His name was legend in his own reality. The Doomslayer, the unchained predator, the scourge of hell. For eons, he had waged a one-man war against the legions of the damned, turning their invasion into their extinction. Hell's mightiest demons learned to fear the sound of his footsteps. Entire demonic civilizations crumbled before his fury. And when hell finally fell, when the icon of sin lay broken and the Dark Lord himself was defeated, the Slayer had not stopped, could not stop. His crusade was eternal. But even eternal crusades can take unexpected turns. The dimensional rift opened on P3X 8888, a barren world dominated by a massive Goa'uld fortress. System Lord Anubis, the half-ascended who had clawed his way back from banishment, had been conducting experiments that the other System Lords considered mad, even by their standards. Ancient texts recovered from a long-dead civilization spoke of realms beyond the Stargate network, dimensions where beings of pure malevolence dwelled in endless torment. Anubis believed he could harness this power, bend it to his will, and complete his ascension. The ritual had taken weeks. Thousands of slaves died to power the massive device, their life force channeled through corrupted ancient technology. The air itself screamed as reality tore open, revealing a swirling vortex of crimson energy. Anubis's Jaffa warriors stepped back in fear, even their decades of indoctrination insufficient to suppress their terror at what their god had unleashed. Something was coming through. The first sign was the music, a grinding, mechanical dirge that seemed to emanate from the rift itself, accompanied by a heartbeat-like percussion that grew louder with each passing second. Then came the heat, waves of impossible temperature that made the very stones of the fortress glow. The Goa'uld sensors shrieked warnings, detecting energy signatures that defied every known classification. And then he stepped through. The Doomslayer emerged from the portal in mid-stride, his Praetor Suit still scorched from his last battle in hell. The armor was a masterwork of impossible engineering, ceramic composite plating over an energy weave that pulsed with barely contained power. His visor glowed with cold green fury, the only visible feature on an otherwise featureless helmet. In his hands, he carried a weapon that looked like it had been forged from violence itself. The super shotgun, its double barrels still smoking. He stopped, scanned the chamber, processed what he saw. Massive stone walls carved with hieroglyphics, golden decorations depicting serpent-headed figures, armored warriors bearing staff weapons and strange golden emblems on their foreheads. And at the center, standing before a throne of black metal, a figure in elaborate golden armor with eyes that glowed with unnatural light. The Doomslayer's threat assessment was instantaneous and absolute. Demons. What he could not know, what he would not have cared about even if he did know, was that the beings before him were not demons at all. They were Goa'uld, parasitic aliens who had enslaved humanity across the galaxy for thousands of years. They were monsters, certainly, but they were flesh and blood, not creatures of hell. The Jaffa warriors who served them were themselves slaves. Human hosts carrying larval Goa'uld symbiotes that granted them strength and longevity at the cost of their freedom. These distinctions mattered greatly to Stargate Command, to the Tok'ra Resistance, to anyone who had spent years navigating the complex moral landscape of galactic politics. They meant absolutely nothing to the Doomslayer. Anubis spoke, his voice resonating with stolen power, the arrogance of a being who believed himself beyond mortality. "I am Anubis, god of the dead. You will kneel before." The Doomslayer fired. The super shotgun's roar was deafening in the enclosed space. The spread caught Anubis' center mass, and the half-ascended Goa'uld staggered backward, his personal shield flaring bright orange as it absorbed the kinetic impact. For a fraction of a second, surprise registered in those glowing eyes. Surprise that anything would dare attack him. Surprise that the attack had actually caused him to feel the impact through his ancient-derived shielding. Then the Slayer was moving. He crossed 30 feet in 2 seconds, his armored boots cracking the stone floor with each step. The Jaffa opened fire, staff weapons discharging with their characteristic hollow thump. Energy blasts that could punch through concrete struck the Praetor Suit and dispersed harmlessly across its shields. The Doomslayer didn't even slow down. The first Jaffa died before he could fire a second shot. The Slayer's fist caved in his chest cavity, the symbiote pouch rupturing with a wet crunch. He grabbed the warrior's helmet and twisted, separating head from body with casual efficiency. The corpse hadn't hit the ground before the Slayer was already moving to the next target, his super shotgun barking death. Chaos erupted. The Jaffa were warriors, bred and trained for combat across centuries. They moved with practiced precision, forming firing lines, calling for reinforcements. It didn't matter. They were fighting something that had survived the armies of hell, something that had killed gods infinitely more powerful than the false deities they served. The Doomslayer waded through them like wheat before a scythe. His fists shattered armor, his shotgun reduced warriors to red mist. When a Jaffa charged with a staff weapon raised like a spear, the Slayer caught it one-handed, ripped it away, and impaled the warrior on his own weapon before using the corpse as a shield against incoming fire. And with each kill, something happened that the Goa'uld sensors recorded but could not explain, as the Slayer executed his enemies with brutal efficiency. A spine ripped out here, a head crushed there. His armor's energy levels increased. The Praetor Suit's shields recharged. Micro damage to the plating sealed itself. He was healing through violence, growing stronger with each execution. Glory kills. In his universe, they sustained him by absorbing argent energy from demon essence. Here, in this new reality, they still worked. Life force was life force, whether demonic or biological. The Goa'uld and their Jaffa servants learned this truth one brutal death at a time. Anubis watched his elite guard fall in seconds. His throne room, which minutes ago had been the site of his greatest triumph, had become an abattoir. This warrior, this thing, had emerged from the rift he'd opened, but it wasn't here to serve. It was here to kill. And judging by its efficiency, it had been doing this for a very, very long time. The half-ascended Goa'uld made a decision. He activated his personal transport rings. Golden light engulfed Anubis as the ancient technology whisked him away to safety aboard his orbiting Hatak mothership. Let this demon have the fortress. Let it slaughter every Jaffa inside. He would bombard the entire complex from orbit, bury this threat under a mountain of molten slag, and then dissect whatever remained. It was a reasonable plan. It was logical. It was what any intelligent being would do when confronted with an overwhelming threat. Anubis had made his first mistake, assuming the Doomslayer could be killed by bombardment. He would not live long enough to make a second. The Slayer stood among the carnage, chest heaving with exertion that was more anticipation than fatigue. His armor's sensors scanned the structure, identifying power sources structural weak points, anything that might lead him to more targets. The facility was massive, built into the side of a mountain. Thousands of life signs registered throughout the complex. Good. He reloaded the super shotgun with practiced efficiency, the motion so ingrained it was automatic. His HUD displayed ammunition counts, shield status, available equipment. The Crucible energy blade was charged. The BFG 9000 had 3 shots remaining. The chainsaw fuel was low, but that would be remedied soon enough. Through the fortress's massive windows, he could see the starlit sky of this alien world. Somewhere up there, he knew the one in the golden armor had fled. That was fine. They always ran. They always thought distance would save them. It never did. The Doomslayer activated his Praetor Suit's helmet speakers, and across the entire fortress, every Jaffa warrior, every enslaved worker, every Goa'uld overseer heard the same sound. A low, grinding mechanical growl that resonated with primal fury. Not words. The Slayer had no words for creatures like these. Just the promise of violence. He marched toward the fortress's interior, his footsteps echoing like a death knell. Behind him, the dimensional rift collapsed with a thunderclap of displaced energy, sealing shut the pathway between universes. The Doomslayer didn't look back. He never looked back. Somewhere in the fortress, a Jaffa officer activated the long-range communication system, sending a desperate message through the Stargate network to anyone who would listen. The message was simple, panicked, and would soon become infamous across the galaxy. A demon has come through the Jaffa Eye. It cannot be stopped. It cannot be reasoned with. May the gods have mercy. The transmission cut off as the super shotgun's roar echoed through the stone corridors. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. The galaxy was about to learn what the legions of hell had discovered too late. Some forces of nature cannot be contained, controlled, or survived. They can only be endured, if you're lucky enough to be on their side. The Doomslayer had arrived, and false gods would fall. The fortress of Anubis burned. Not with conventional fire. The Doomslayer didn't bother with incendiaries when his fists worked just as well. But the very air seemed to combust with violence as he carved a path of absolute devastation through level after level of the ancient stronghold. The Goa'uld had built this place to inspire awe and terror. Its corridors wide enough to march armies through, its ceilings vaulted to accommodate the massive golden statues of their false god. Those same corridors now ran red with blood. Those same statues toppled and shattered as the Slayer used them for cover, for weapons, for simple vindictive destruction. The Jaffa warriors fought with everything they had. Credit where it was due, they were professionals. When the first wave died screaming, the second wave came prepared. They established kill zones with overlapping fields of fire. They collapsed corridors behind them to funnel the threat into prepared positions. They even attempted rudimentary tactics, using Zatnik Tel's Goa'uld stun weapons, in hopes that incapacitation might work where killing had failed. The Doomslayer walked through their ambushes like a man walking through morning fog. A staff weapon blast struck his shoulder pauldron, and the Praetor Suit's shields flickered but held. He didn't even turn toward the shooter. His left hand rose, and the equipment launcher on his suit fired a frag grenade with pinpoint accuracy. The explosive detonated in the middle of a Jaffa firing position, and the screams lasted exactly 2 seconds before the Slayer was among them, finishing what the grenade had started. One warrior, braver or more foolish than the rest, charged with a Matok staff raised like a quarterstaff. The Slayer caught the weapon mid-swing, and for a brief moment, the Jaffa found himself in a contest of pure strength with something that had arm-wrestled demons the size of buildings. The staff bent, then snapped. Then the jagged end was driven through the warrior's chest with enough force to pin him to the wall behind. The Doomslayer ripped the symbiote pouch open. He'd learned quickly that these creatures carried something living inside them, and crushed the infant Goa'uld larva in his fist. The sensation triggered something in his threat assessment protocols. These weren't just warriors. They were hosts, parasites controlling human bodies. It didn't make him hesitate. If anything, it confirmed his initial judgment. Demons, by any other name. He moved deeper into the fortress, following the densest concentrations of life signs. The architecture changed as he descended, becoming less ostentatious and more functional. Holding cells lined these lower corridors, filled with humans in various states of malnutrition and despair. Slaves, workers, future hosts for the parasites. The Slayer's visor swept across them, his suit's sensors cataloging their vital signs, the crude restraints, the obvious signs of long-term captivity. These were victims, prey, not threats. He kept moving. A dozen Jaffa had fortified the entrance to what his sensors identified as a major power distribution node. They'd erected portable barriers, energy shields that glowed with the same orange hue as personal protection fields. Smart. They'd learned that physical barriers didn't slow him down. Energy fields at least bought seconds. The Doomslayer loaded the BFG 9000. The weapon was a masterwork of Argent energy technology, a rifle-sized device that fired contained spheres of supercharged plasma. In his home universe, one shot could clear a room of demons. Here, the principles remained the same. Energy was energy. Matter was matter. And when you introduced enough of the former to the latter at sufficient velocities, the results were predictably catastrophic. He fired. The green sphere erupted from the barrel and streaked down the corridor, tendrils of electricity arcing to every living thing in its path. The energy shields overloaded instantly, their generators exploding in showers of sparks. The Jaffa behind them had a fraction of a second to understand what was happening before the BFG's payload reached critical proximity and detonated. The blast vaporized the first rank completely. The second rank was thrown backward by the shockwave, armor melting, symbiote pouches rupturing. The third rank, positioned at the corridor junction, was flash-cooked inside their own armor. The power node itself went critical, secondary explosions ripping through the walls as containment failed. When the smoke cleared, nothing lived in that corridor except the Slayer. He reloaded the BFG with mechanical precision. 2 shots left. The fortress's communication systems crackled to life, and Anubis's voice echoed through every speaker, every hall, every chamber. The half-ascended Goa'uld had retreated to orbit, but his ego demanded he still be heard. You are impressive, warrior, but ultimately futile. My Jaffa number in the thousands. You are but one. Even if you kill every soldier in this fortress, I will simply bring more. Surrender, and I will grant you a swift death. Resist, and I will make your suffering legendary. The Doomslayer responded by ripping a security console from the wall and hurling it through the nearest window. The gesture was eloquent in its simplicity. He didn't negotiate with demons. The descent continued. Level 7, Level 8. Each floor was a maze of barracks, armories, command centers, and ritual chambers, where Goa'uld had performed whatever cruel ceremonies passed for religion among parasitic slavers. The Slayer disabled them all, with systematic efficiency. A grenade here, a crucible slashed there, when he encountered a chamber filled with sarcophagi. Goa'uld healing devices that could resurrect the dead. He activated the crucible and carved through every single one, ensuring they'd never be used again. In an armory on level 9, he found what these creatures considered weapons of power. Staff, weapons racked by the hundreds, zats hanging from pegs, even a few exotic pieces that his suit's database couldn't identify. He examined a staff weapon briefly, noting its plasma cartridge system, its inefficient energy-to-damage ratio, its overwrought ceremonial design. Then he snapped it in half and moved on. His super shotgun had been killing demons for eons. It would serve just fine here. The Jaffa were adapting, learning. By level 10, they'd stopped trying to fight him head-on. Instead, they collapsed entire sections of the fortress, trying to bury him under tons of stone. The Praetor Suit's shields held against the falling debris. When the dust settled, the Slayer simply punched through the rubble, his armored fists breaking bedrock like brittle clay. On level 11, they tried gas, some kind of airborne toxin that their sensors indicated would kill any human in seconds. The Slayer's helmet didn't even register it as a threat. His suit was designed to operate in the vacuum of space, in the acidic atmosphere of hell dimensions, in environments where reality itself was questionable. A little poison gas was an insult to his armor's capabilities. Level 12 brought a new type of enemy, Horus Guards, the elite warriors of the Goa'uld system lords. They wore heavier armor styled after falcon heads, carried more powerful weapons, and fought with discipline that spoke of centuries of training. 20 of them formed a phalanx in the central chamber, their staff weapons locked in synchronized firing patterns. The Doomslayer activated Berserk mode. The power-up flooded his system with pure, undiluted fury. His already superhuman strength multiplied tenfold. His vision tinged red. For the next 30 seconds, he was less a soldier and more a force of nature given humanoid form. He didn't run toward the phalanx. He charged. The staff weapons fired, their plasma bolts converging on his position. The Praetor Suit's shields collapsed under the concentrated barrage, but by then, he was already among them. His first punch caved in a Horus Guard's chest cavity so deeply that his fist emerged from the warrior's back. He grabbed a second guard by the helmet and slammed him into the floor with enough force to crater the stone. A third guard tried to bring his staff weapon to bear in close quarters. The Slayer ripped the man's arms off at the shoulders and beat him to death with his own limbs. Berserk mode didn't make him invincible. It made him inevitable. When it wore off 28 seconds later, all 20 Horus Guards lay in pieces across the chamber. The Slayer's armor was scorched, his shield slowly recharging, but he was otherwise unharmed. He paused only long enough to perform a glory kill on the last dying guard, crushing the man's skull beneath his boot and absorbing the life force to restore his armor's integrity. Level 13. Level 14. The numbers didn't matter. The opposition didn't matter. The Doomslayer was a machine of violence, and machines don't tire, don't doubt, don't stop. On level 15, he found Anubis's inner sanctum, a vast chamber dominated by ancient technology, walls covered in equations and diagrams that even the Slayer's advanced HUD struggled to translate. This was where the ritual had been conducted, where the rift had been opened, where this entire incident had begun. The technology was still active, humming with residual power. Crystals the size of men pulsed with energy, feeding into a central device that looked like it had been ripped from 3 different civilizations and welded together by someone with more ambition than sense. The Doomslayer understood ancient technology about as well as the ancients understood Argent energy, which is to say not at all. But he knew a dimensional gateway when he saw one. He'd spent enough time charging through Hell's portals to recognize the signature. This was how he'd arrived. This was the tear between universes. It was also a potential way home. The Slayer stood before the device for exactly 5 seconds, his posture utterly still. Then he raised the BFG 9000 and obliterated it. The explosion was spectacular. The ancient crystals detonated in a cascading chain reaction, their energy release sufficient to vaporize the entire chamber. The Doomslayer's shields absorbed what they could, his armor taking the rest. When the light faded, nothing remained of the dimensional gateway except molten slag and fading energy signatures. He'd just destroyed his only confirmed way home. He didn't care. Home was where the demons were. And right now, this fortress was crawling with them. The Slayer ascended toward the surface levels, his path marked by the bodies of every warrior foolish enough to stand in his way. By the time he emerged into the fortress's main courtyard, over 2,000. Jaffa lay dead in his wake. The entire garrison, decimated in under 3 hours. Above him, visible through the fortress's open roof, Anubis's Hatak mothership hung in orbit like a golden dagger. The System Lord had been watching the entire slaughter through security feeds, had witnessed the systematic destruction of his fortress, his army, his grand experiment. The Doomslayer stood in the courtyard, surrounded by carnage, and stared directly at the orbiting ship. His helmet's external speakers activated, broadcasting not words, but that same grinding, mechanical growl. A challenge, a promise, a prophecy of violence to come. In orbit, Anubis made his decision. If he couldn't control this warrior, he would eliminate him. He gave the order. The Hatak's main weapons charged, staff cannons capable of reducing mountains to vapor. The ship's targeting systems locked onto the fortress. The Doomslayer didn't move, didn't seek cover, just stood there, waiting. The bombardment began. The staff cannons of a Hatak mothership were capable of glassing planetary surfaces. Each blast carried enough energy to vaporize a city block. Anubis, watching from his command throne aboard the vessel, ordered a full barrage, not the surgical strikes typically used to intimidate rebellious populations, but a sustained bombardment designed to erase the fortress and everything in it from existence. Golden lances of superheated plasma rained from the sky. The first volley struck the fortress's outer walls, and ancient stone that had stood for millennia evaporated in milliseconds. The second volley penetrated deeper, collapsing entire wings of the structure. The third, fourth, and fifth volleys turned the courtyard where the Doomslayer stood into a hellscape of molten rock and superheated air. The bombardment continued for 17 minutes. By the time Anubis gave the order to cease fire, the fortress had been reduced to a smoking crater 1/2 mile wide and 300 feet deep. The mountain itself had partially collapsed, burying whatever remained under millions of tons of debris. Thermal sensors showed nothing but cooling magma and residual heat signatures. Anubis's first prime, a scarred Jaffa named Herak, approached the command throne. "My lord, the target has been eliminated. No life signs remain." "Are you certain?" Anubis's voice carried the careful pronunciation of someone who had learned to doubt absolute statements. "The sensors detect nothing, my lord. Even if the warrior somehow survived the initial strikes, he would have been buried under..." The sensor station erupted with alarms. Every Jaffa on the bridge spun toward the tactical displays. At first, the readings made no sense. The crater was moving, not shifting from geological instability, actively moving. Rocks the size of buildings were being displaced from within, thrown aside by something forcing its way upward through the debris field. "Enhance visual," Anubis commanded, leaning forward on his throne. The main view screen zoomed in on the crater's center. For a moment, nothing was visible through the smoke and dust. Then, a shape emerged. Humanoid, armored, covered in cooling slag that cracked and fell away with each movement. The Praetor Suit's shields had collapsed under the bombardment, the armor itself scorched black and pitted with heat damage. But the figure within was intact. The Doomslayer stood in the center of the crater and looked up at the orbiting ship. "Impossible," Herak whispered. "Nothing survives bombardment from—" "Clearly something does." Anubis's glowing eyes narrowed. He had existed for thousands of years, had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, had himself returned from death more than once. But this warrior defied every calculation, every known limitation of biology and technology. The half-ascended Goa'uld made a decision that would have been unthinkable hours ago. Retreat was the logical option. Set course for the Doomslayer, activated his equipment launcher, and fired a grappling hook. The projectile streaked upward, its trajectory computer-corrected to account for orbital mechanics, atmospheric drag, and relative velocity. It wasn't designed to reach orbit. The Praetor Suit's equipment had limitations even in its advanced state. But it didn't need to reach the Hatak. It just needed to reach the debris field. The fortress's destruction had sent countless fragments into low orbit. Chunks of stone, twisted metal, and pieces of ancient technology still glowing with residual power. The Slayer's grappling hook latched onto a particularly large piece, and the suit's winch system activated with a mechanical whine. He was pulled off the ground at tremendous velocity, his armored form rocketing upward through the atmosphere. The friction generated enough heat to turn his armor's exterior cherry red, but the Praetor Suit had been forged to withstand the flames of hell itself. Earth's atmosphere was a mild inconvenience. As he reached the debris field, he released the grappling hook and grabbed a larger fragment, a twisted beam of Naquata-reinforced metal 20 feet long. Using it as a springboard, he jumped, his suit's thrusters firing to provide additional momentum. Then he grabbed another fragment, and another, ascending through the debris field in a series of impossible leaps, each one carrying him higher, faster, closer to the golden ship that hung in the void above. On the Hatak's bridge, chaos erupted. "My lord, the target is ascending." Herak's voice had climbed an octave. "He's using the debris field as he's jumping between. This is impossible. Fire all weapons. Destroy him." Anubis rose from his throne, his composure finally cracking. The Hatak's defensive grid activated. Smaller staff cannons designed for anti-fighter operations locked onto the ascending target and opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked through space, tracking the armored figure as he bounded from fragment to fragment with inhuman agility. The Doomslayer twisted in mid-leap, his suit's maneuvering thrusters firing to dodge incoming fire. A plasma bolt passed close enough to superheat his right pauldron. Another struck a debris fragment seconds after he'd pushed off from it, vaporizing it entirely. He didn't slow down. A piece of ancient technology, some kind of power conduit still crackling with energy, provided his final springboard. The Slayer's boots struck it with enough force to crack its crystalline structure, and he launched himself directly at the Hatak's hull. He covered the final 200 meters in seconds, his armored form impacting the golden plating with a sound that reverberated through the entire ship. The Praetor Suit's magnetic boots activated, locking him to the hull. He was on the vessel's lower surface, directly beneath the main hangar bay, if his sensors were reading the ship's layout correctly. Anubis's voice boomed through external speakers. "You will die in the void, warrior. Even if you breach the hull, my Jaffa number in the thousands aboard this vessel alone. You cannot—" The Doomslayer activated the crucible. The energy blade erupted from its housing with a sound like reality tearing, a 7-foot beam of concentrated argent energy that burned brighter than the local star. He plunged it into the Hatak's hull, and the supposedly impregnable Naquata alloy parted like tissue paper. The blade cut through 3 feet of armor, structural supports, and internal systems in a single stroke. Atmosphere began venting from the breach, creating a localized storm as the ship's interior pressure equalized with the vacuum. The Slayer enlarged the hole methodically. cutting a circular opening large enough for his armored form. When he'd created sufficient space, he deactivated the magnetic boots and dropped into the ship. He fell through a maintenance corridor, his descent controlled by short bursts from his suit's thrusters. Jaffa engineers who'd been responding to the hull breach looked up just in time to see an armored demon fall from the ceiling. The Slayer landed in their midst, and the super shotgun began its terrible work. Alarms shrieked throughout the Hatak. Red alert lighting bathed the corridors in crimson. Anubis's voice echoed from every speaker. "Intruder on Deck 7. All Jaffa, converge and eliminate the threat. Seal all sections. Activate internal defenses." The ship was a city in space, a pyramid-shaped vessel over a mile on each side, with hundreds of decks and thousands of inhabitants. Its corridors were wide enough to march armies through, its chambers vast enough to hold entire battalions. Anubis had chosen this vessel as his flagship specifically because it could carry overwhelming force. He was about to learn that overwhelming force meant nothing against something that had destroyed hell itself. The Doomslayer moved through the Hatak like a virus through an organism, spreading chaos and death with systematic efficiency. His suit's sensors mapped the ship's layout as he progressed, identifying critical systems, power junctions, and the densest concentrations of enemy troops. He made for them all. Deck 7 became a charnel house. The Jaffa stationed there erected barricades and prepared defensive positions, but the Slayers simply went through walls when corridors proved too well defended. The Crucible cut through bulkheads as easily as it had cut through the exterior hull. He'd emerge in the middle of their positions, already firing, already killing. On Deck 8, they tried flooding entire sections with hard vacuum, activating emergency decompression protocols to blow the intruder into space. The Praetor Suit's seals held perfectly. It was designed to operate in environments far more hostile than mere vacuum. The Jaffa, lacking such protection, died gasping while the Slayer walked through their suffocating midst, putting them out of their misery with brutal efficiency. Deck 9 housed the ship's primary troop barracks. 500 Jaffa warriors armed and armored for battle. They formed a phalanx in the main assembly hall, a wall of shields and staff weapons that had broken countless enemy formations across centuries of warfare. The Doomslayer loaded the BFG 9000 and fired his second-to-last shot. The green sphere of argent energy streaked down the corridor and into the assembly hall. The detonation was biblical in scale. The BFG's tendrils arced to every living thing in the chamber, superheating flesh, boiling blood, cooking Jaffa inside their armor like meat in bronze ovens. The phalanx didn't break. It simply ceased to exist. 500 warriors reduced to charred corpses in under 3 seconds. One shot left in the BFG. The Slayer holstered it and continued with conventional weapons. On the bridge, Herak turned to Anubis with undisguised terror in his eyes. "My lord, we've lost decks 7 through 9. Casualties exceed 800. The intruder is advancing toward the reactor core. If he reaches it, I am aware of the implications." Anubis's voice had gone cold, calculated. "Activate the ship's cull warriors." Herak's face went pale. "My lord, they are not yet fully tested. The neural programming, now." In a sealed chamber on Deck 12, 40 sarcophagi opened with hydraulic hisses. From each emerged a warrior clad in black armor that seemed to absorb light. Cull warriors, Anubis's greatest creation. They were genetically engineered super soldiers, immune to staff weapons and zats, programmed with absolute loyalty, and virtually indestructible by conventional means. Each one was worth 100 Jaffa. Anubis sent them all to stop one man. The Doomslayer was on Deck 10 when his sensors detected the new threat signatures. 40 contacts. Moving with coordinated precision, energy readings significantly higher than standard Jaffa. His hoodie classified them as priority targets and highlighted potential weaknesses in their armor configuration. They met in the ship's main power distribution center, a vast chamber dominated by massive Naquata reactors that hummed with barely contained energy. The Goa'uld warriors entered from 4 different access points, surrounding the Slayer in a perfect tactical formation. They moved with inhuman synchronization, their armor-plated bodies creating a living cage of death. For a moment, the chamber was silent except for the reactor's deep thrumming. The Goa'uld warriors stood motionless, their helmets' red optics fixed on the armored figure at the room's center. The Doomslayer assessed them with the cold calculation of a predator evaluating prey. Then the Goa'uld warriors opened fire with weapons that looked like staff weapons, but burned with different fire. Goa'uld disruptors, energy weapons calibrated to bypass conventional shielding. The Doomslayer smiled behind his visor. Finally, something interesting. The Goa'uld disruptors fired streams of concentrated energy that tore through the air with a sound like screaming metal. The Praetor Suit's shields flared under the barrage, and for the first time since arriving in this universe, the Doomslayer felt actual resistance. These weapons had bite. The energy they discharged operated on different principles than the staff weapons. More focused, more penetrating, designed specifically to overwhelm defensive systems. The Slayer dove behind one of the massive reactor columns as disruptor fire carved molten furrows in the deck plating where he'd been standing. The Goa'uld warriors advanced with mechanical precision, their formations overlapping to maintain constant fire pressure. No wasted movement, no hesitation. These weren't conscripts or enslaved soldiers. They were purpose-built weapons wrapped in humanoid shells. Perfect. The Doomslayer had been fighting purpose-built weapons for eons. Hell's demons were each crafted for specific combat roles. Barons of Hell for overwhelming force, Archviles for range support, Marauders for tactical challenge. These Goa'uld warriors were just another variation on the same theme. Dangerous, yes, but nothing he hadn't faced 1,000 times before. He activated his equipment launcher and fired a proximity mine around the column's edge. The device clamped onto the deck plating and armed itself with a barely audible beep. 3 Goa'uld warriors advanced past it, their sensors apparently not configured to detect such primitive explosives. The mine detonated in a blast of shrapnel and concussive force. The lead Goa'uld warrior was thrown backward, his armor cracked but not breached. The second stumbled but recovered. The third was unaffected, stepping over his fallen comrade without breaking stride. The Slayer processed this information instantly. Enhanced durability, possible regenerative capabilities, operating as a networked unit. Standard tactics wouldn't work. He needed to be creative. He loaded the super shotgun and charged. The move was so direct, so suicidal by conventional military doctrine, that the Goa'uld warriors' tactical programming took a full second to adjust. That second was fatal. The Slayer burst from cover at full sprint, his armored bulk covering 30 feet in a heartbeat. The first Goa'uld warrior raised his disruptor. The Slayer batted it aside with one hand and drove the super shotgun's barrels directly against the warrior's helmet at point-blank range. The double blast at 0 range punched through even the advanced Goa'uld armor. The helmet exploded in a spray of metal and biological matter. Before the body hit the ground, the Slayer had grabbed it by the chest plate and used it as a shield, charging into the next warrior with the corpse leading the way. The impact sent both warriors, one dead, one living, crashing into a reactor support. The Slayer tossed the corpse aside and grabbed the stunned Goa'uld warrior's head with both hands. He twisted. The neck snapped with a sound like breaking ceramic. Glory kill energy flooded into the Praetor Suit, restoring shield capacity. The remaining Goa'uld warriors recalibrated. Their formation shifted from suppressive fire to close quarters engagement. They drew hand-to-hand weapons, blades that crackled with the same disruptor energy as their rifles. If the intruder wanted close combat, they would oblige him. They were making the same mistake every demon in hell had made, assuming that because the Doomslayer excelled at close range, he was vulnerable at range. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. He excelled at every range. He simply preferred to feel his enemies die. The Slayer holstered the super shotgun and drew the crucible. The Argent energy blade ignited with its characteristic reality-warping hum. The Kull warriors hesitated for the first time, their threat assessment systems struggling to classify the weapon. Their armor was designed to withstand energy weapons based on known technology. The crucible was technology from a universe where the laws of physics were more suggestions than rules. He met their charge head-on. The first Kull warrior swung his disruptor blade in a calculated strike aimed at the Slayer's center mass. The crucible intercepted it, and the disruptor blade simply ceased to exist where the two weapons met. The Slayer continued the motion, bisecting the warrior from shoulder to hip. The Kull's regenerative capabilities proved irrelevant when both halves of his body fell in different directions. Two more warriors attacked in tandem, their movements synchronized with inhuman precision. The Slayer ducked under one blade, parried the second with his left gauntlet, the armor's plating absorbing the energy discharge, and drove the crucible through both warriors in a single thrust. The Argent blade punched through the first warrior's chest, continued through his spine, and emerged to impale the second warrior behind him. He kicked both corpses off the blade and spun to face the next wave. The Kull warriors were learning, adapting their tactics in real time. They began using the reactor chamber's environment against him, forcing him into positions where the massive energy conduits limited his mobility. Disruptor fire from multiple angles converged on these choke points, the warriors clearly hoping to pin him down and overwhelm even the Praetor Suit's shields through sustained fire. The Doomslayer responded by going up. His suit's jump jets fired, launching him 20 feet into the air. He grabbed one of the ceiling's support struts and used it to swing his momentum, releasing at the apex to fly across the chamber. The Kull warriors tracked him, their disruptors painting the air with deadly energy. But he was already moving, already 3 steps ahead in the combat calculus. He landed in the middle of 6 warriors who'd been positioned as rear support. The crucible carved through 2 before they could turn. The third took a point-blank rocket from the equipment launcher, the explosion reducing him to shrapnel that peppered his comrades. The 4th and 5th died to glory kills. One had his helmet torn off and his skull caved in by a single punch. The other had his spine ripped out through his back. The 6th warrior managed to fire his disruptor at near point-blank range. The beam struck the Slayer's chest plate dead center, and the Praetor Suit's shields collapsed entirely. The energy discharge scorched the ceramic composite armor beneath, burning through the outer layer and cracking the energy weave. Warning indicators flashed across the Slayer's HUD, shield systems offline, armor integrity at 60%. The Kull warrior pressed his advantage, firing again. The Doomslayer caught the disruptor rifle with his bare hand. The energy discharge burned his gauntlet, the heat sufficient to glow red-hot through the armor plating. The Slayer's grip didn't waver. He ripped the weapon from the warrior's grasp, reversed it one-handed, and fired it directly into the Kull's chest at maximum power. The disruptor beam, designed to penetrate advanced shielding, performed exactly as intended when used against its creators. The Kull warrior's chest plate melted, then his chest, then everything behind it. 22 Kull warriors remained. They had regrouped at the chamber's far end, forming a defensive semicircle around the primary reactor core. Their tactical systems had finally classified the threat correctly. Apex Predator, Extreme Prejudice authorized. Do not engage in close combat under any circumstances. They opened fire with all weapons simultaneously, creating a literal wall of disruptor energy between themselves and the Slayer. The air itself ionized, temperatures spiking to levels that would have incinerated unprotected humans. The deck plating melted, support structures sagged. The reactor core's protective shielding flickered under the ambient energy discharge. The Doom Slayer walked forward through the barrage. Without shields, the disruptor fire struck his armor directly. The Praetor Suit held, but barely. Each impact carved away another layer of protection. Each step cost him another percentage of armor integrity. His HUD was a constellation of warnings and damage indicators. By all conventional logic, he should have fallen back, found cover, waited for his shields to regenerate. The Doomslayer had never been accused of following conventional logic. He reached the halfway point across the chamber, his armor smoking and pitted with energy burns. The Kull warriors maintained fire discipline, their barrage unwavering. 15 yards, 10 yards, 5. He activated his final BFG shot. The green sphere erupted from the weapon's barrel at point-blank range, close enough that the Slayer felt the backwash of argent energy against his damaged armor. The BFG's payload streaked across the remaining distance in a microsecond, its tendrils already arcing toward every Kull warrior in the formation. The detonation was spectacular. The BFG's argent energy, a force from a dimension where hell itself was real, met the Naquadah reactor's contained power in a catastrophic interaction that neither universe's physics were quite prepared for. The resulting explosion tore through the chamber, vaporizing the remaining Kull warriors, cracking the reactor core's containment, and sending a shockwave through the entire deck. The Doomslayer was thrown backward by the blast, his armored form tumbling through the air until he crashed into a bulkhead hard enough to dent the metal. He rose slowly, his armor blackened and cracked, his shield still offline, his HUD flickering with critical damage warnings. Every Kull warrior was dead. He reloaded the BFG's empty chamber with his last Argent cell. The motion automatic despite the damage to his suit's servos. The weapon hummed as it charged, its internal mechanisms converting raw Argent energy into something even more destructive. One shot. He'd make it count. The reactor core was going critical. The Slayer's sensors detected the cascading failure, containment compromised, power levels spiking, estimated time to catastrophic detonation. 4 minutes. An Naquadah reactor explosion would vaporize the entire Hatak and everything within 1,000 miles. The Doomslayer turned and walked calmly toward the chamber's exit. On the bridge, Anubis watched the sensor readings with something approaching genuine fear. His Kull warriors, his perfect soldiers, his masterwork creations, had been eliminated. The reactor was failing, and the intruder was still alive, still moving, still hunting. "Evacuate the ship," Anubis commanded, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "All personnel to the Peltax. Prepare my personal vessel for immediate departure." "My lord, the hangar bays are between us and—" Then we ring to the surface and gate to safety. Anubis rose from his throne, his half-ascended nature allowing him to perceive probabilities and outcomes beyond mortal ken. In every calculation, every possible future, staying aboard this ship led to death. Activate all remaining defenses. Seal every bulkhead between the reactor and the bridge. Everything we have, throw it at him. It won't stop him, my lord. I know. Anubis moved toward the ring platform. But it will slow him down, and that's all we need. The half-ascended Goa'uld disappeared in a flash of golden light, abandoning his flagship, his crew, and any pretense of divine invulnerability. Above all things, Anubis valued survival. He could acquire new ships, new armies, new Kull warriors. But he couldn't do any of that if he was dead. The Doomslayer emerged from the reactor chamber, into a corridor filled with the last defenders. Standard Jaffa warriors, hundreds of them, making their final stand because their god had commanded it, because they believed, because they had nowhere else to go. The Slayer almost pitied them, almost. He raised the super shotgun and fired. The remaining Jaffa died as they had lived, in service to a false god who had already abandoned them. The Doom Slayer advanced through their ranks like an inevitable tide, each shotgun blast reducing warriors to red mist, each glory kill restoring just enough armor integrity to sustain him through the next engagement. Behind him, the reactor's countdown continued its inexorable march toward detonation. 3 minutes. Deck 11 was a maze of command centers and tactical stations, now emptied of personnel as the evacuation orders spread through the ship. The Slayer's sensors detected life signs fleeing toward the hangar bays and ring platforms, rats abandoning the sinking vessel. He let them go. His target was singular: the bridge and whatever passed for leadership in this demon stronghold. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. He reached a major intersection where automated defenses had been activated, staff cannons built into the walls, energy barriers designed to contain boarding actions, even crude shock fields that electrified the deck plating. Desperate measures from a desperate crew. The Slayer walked through them all, his damaged armor absorbing punishment that would have killed anything organic. When a staff cannon's targeting system locked onto him, he ripped it from its housing and used it to batter down the energy barrier beyond. 2 minutes. The bridge entrance loomed ahead, massive golden doors inscribed with hieroglyphics proclaiming Anubis's greatness. They were sealed, reinforced, designed to withstand sustained assault from heavy weapons. The Doomslayer drew the crucible, its argent blade cutting through the supposedly impregnable barrier like a knife through water. The doors collapsed inward, revealing the Hatak's command center. Empty. The bridge was abandoned, its station still active, but unmanned. Holographic displays showed the ship's status, critical failures cascading through every system, life support failing on multiple decks, the reactor's containment sphere counting down its final seconds. Through the massive forward viewport, the planet P3X-888 hung in space, its surface scarred by the fortress bombardment. 1 minute, 30 seconds. The Slayer's sensors detected a residual energy signature near the command throne. Asgard transport technology, recently activated. The parasite leader had fled, using some kind of instantaneous transportation. Coward. They always ran. They always thought distance would save them. The Doomslayer walked to the forward viewport and stared down at the planet below. His suit's sensors were already scanning for Stargate signatures, life signs, anything that might indicate where his prey had gone. The galaxy was vast, but he'd hunted through Hell's infinite dimensions. Space was just another battlefield. 1 minute. He activated the ring transporter. Golden light engulfed him, and reality twisted as the ancient technology disassembled his atoms and transmitted them through subspace to the planet's surface. The sensation lasted less than a second. He'd experienced dimensional travel that was far more disorienting. When the light faded, he stood on the scarred surface of P3X-888, 3 miles from the ruined fortress. 30 seconds. The Slayer looked up at the orbiting Hatak, its golden hull reflecting the system's star. For a moment, it hung there like a second sun, beautiful in its alien geometry, a testament to the false god's stolen grandeur. Then it detonated. The reactor's containment failed catastrophically, and the Naquata fuel underwent immediate and total conversion to energy. The explosion was visible from neighboring star systems, a miniature supernova that bloomed across the void. The Hatak and the 1,000 Jaffa still aboard when their god abandoned them ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. They became light heat, and expanding plasma. The shockwave reached the planet 12 seconds later, a wall of electromagnetic energy that would have scrambled any conventional electronics. The Praetor Suit weathered it without complaint, its shielding now partially regenerated, dispersing the worst of the radiation. When the light faded, nothing remained in orbit except a rapidly expanding debris field and fading energy signatures. The Doomslayer's HUD recalibrated, scanning for new threats, new targets. His armor was battered, its once pristine surface scored and pitted with battle damage. But his weapons were functional, and his resolve was absolute. The parasite leader had escaped. Unacceptable. He would track him down, wherever in this galaxy he'd fled, and finish what he'd started. But first, he needed to understand this universe's layout. His sensors had detected that circular device during his initial arrival, the Stargate, his suit's database had labeled it, after processing the local electromagnetic signatures. A transportation network, apparently, connecting thousands of worlds. The parasites used it to spread their infection. The Slayer began walking toward the ruined fortress. The Stargate would be there, somewhere in the wreckage. He would learn how it functioned, where it could take him, and then he would use it to hunt down every last parasite stronghold in this. His proximity sensors screamed a warning. The Slayer spun, bringing the super shotgun to bear, as 4 distinct energy signatures materialized 50 yards away. Not the golden light of Goa'uld transport rings, this was different. Cleaner, more precise. 4 humanoid figures appeared in a flash of white light, armed and immediately taking tactical positions. Humans. The Doomslayer's threat assessment protocols processed this information rapidly. No golden emblems on their foreheads, no staff weapons. They carried kinetic projectiles, bullets, his database identified them, in weapons that looked almost primitive compared to the energy technology he'd encountered so far. They wore tactical gear that suggested military training, and their movement spoke of professional competence, not parasites, not hosts, actual humans. The lead figure, a man with graying hair and an expression that suggested he'd seen more than his share of impossible situations, raised one hand in a universal gesture of peace while keeping his weapon, a P-90 submachine gun, pointed carefully at the ground. His other hand held some kind of energy weapon the Slayer's sensors couldn't immediately classify. "Easy there, big guy," the man said, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone accustomed to tense negotiations. "We're not here to fight. Well, not you anyway. We're from Earth, Stargate Command. And unless I'm very much mistaken, you just single-handedly destroyed one of Anubis's Hattaks." He paused, glancing at the orbital debris field still glowing in the sky. Which is actually pretty damn impressive. The Doomslayer didn't lower his weapon. His sensors analyzed the 4 figures. Target 1, male, approximately 50 years old, elevated stress hormones, but controlled respiration. Leader, armed with P-90 and unknown energy weapon. Threat level, minimal. Target 2, female, mid-30s, carrying technical equipment and scanner. Elevated intelligence indicators based on visual analysis of gear modifications. Scientist, armed with pistol. Threat level, negligible. Target 3, male, mid-30s, wearing glasses, carrying archaeological tools alongside weapons. Non-combatant specialist, elevated cortisol suggesting fear but controlled. Threat level, negligible. Target 4, large male, gold emblem on forehead, but body language suggests voluntary presence with the others. Former host, symbiote visible. Conflicting data, threat level uncertain. The one with the gold emblem, a Jaffa by all appearances, stepped forward slowly, his staff weapon held in a non-threatening position. "I am Teal'c of Chulak." I was once first primed to the false god Apophis, but I have renounced the Goa'uld and now fight alongside the Tauri, the humans of Earth. We witnessed your battle with Anubis's forces." He gestured at the destruction surrounding them. "We seek allies against the Goa'uld. Perhaps we might speak before." The Doomslayer raised the super shotgun and aimed directly at Teal'c's chest. The response was immediate. All 4 humans brought their weapons up, the leader's P90 and energy weapon both aimed at the Slayer's center mass. The female moved behind cover while maintaining her sidearm sight picture. The one with glasses scrambled backward, his own weapon raised with hands that shook slightly. Only Teal'c remained motionless, his staff weapon still lowered, his expression calm. "Stand down," the leader barked, though it wasn't clear if he was addressing his team or the Slayer. "Daniel, Carter, weapons down, now." "Sir, he's aiming at Teal'c," the woman protested. "I can see that, Carter. I'm also seeing that if he wanted Teal'c dead, Teal'c would already be dead. Something else is going on. Here." The leader took a careful step forward, lowering his P90 slightly. "Look, I don't know where you're from or what your deal is, but you've clearly got a hate-on for the Goa'uld. We share that sentiment. The Jaffa," he gestured at Teal'c, "are slaves, unwilling hosts to parasitic larvae. Teal'c here broke free. He's been helping us fight the Goa'uld for years." The Slayer's aim didn't waver. His sensors continued analyzing Teal'c, detecting the symbiote pouch, the elevated regeneration rates, the enhanced strength. By every metric his combat experience had taught him, this was a host, a possessed human. The parasite might claim to be different, might claim to be helping. But parasites lied. Demons lied. It was their nature. And yet, these other humans stood beside the possessed one willingly, defended him, fought alongside him. The behavioral data didn't match demonic corruption. Hosts were slaves, controlled, broken. This one moved with autonomy, spoke with independent thought, displayed emotional responses inconsistent with possession. The Doomslayer's threat assessment protocols flagged an uncertainty marker. Insufficient data. The leader seemed to sense the hesitation. "My name is Colonel Jack O'Neill. 2 L's. This is Major Samantha Carter, our science officer. That's Dr. Daniel Jackson, archaeologist and linguist. And you've already met Teal'c. We're SG-1, and we've been fighting the Goa'uld for 6 years. We've freed Jaffa, liberated planets, and generally made life hell for every snakehead system lord we could find." He gestured at the ruins around them. "We came here because we detected massive energy discharges and a Hatak in orbit. We were preparing to either mount a rescue operation or document another Goa'uld atrocity. Instead, we find one guy." He looked the Slayer up and down, taking in the battle-scarred armor, the smoking weapons, the aura of barely contained violence, who apparently decided to take on an entire Goa'uld fortress and flagship by himself. And won. O'Neill lowered his P90 completely, making a show of engaging the safety. "So, here's my question. Are you friend, foe, or something so far off the scale we need a whole new category? Because right now, the galaxy could use someone who hits the Goa'uld like you apparently do." The Doomslayer processed this information with the cold logic of centuries of warfare. These humans were enemies of the parasites. They fought to free their kind from possession. They operated as a team, not as enslaved hosts. The possessed one with them moved autonomously, suggesting the parasite relationship here was more complex than demonic possession. Insufficient data for kill confirmation. The Slayer lowered the super shotgun fractionally. Not a sign of trust, but an acknowledgement that immediate threat assessment was negative. His helmet's external speakers activated with that mechanical growl, not words, but a sound that conveyed cautious acknowledgement. "Daniel, Jackson pushed his glasses up nervously. Did he just growl at us? I think that was a hello, O'Neill replied. Or possibly, I haven't decided whether to kill you yet. With the strong silent type, it's hard to tell. Carter was studying her scanner, her expression shifting from cautious to amazed. Sir, I'm reading technology signatures I've never seen before. His armor is generating energy fields that shouldn't be possible with known materials. And those weapons... She gestured at the Slayer's arsenal. The energy blade he's carrying is operating on principles that would make the ancients jealous. Can you communicate? Teal'c asked, his voice calm and measured. Do you understand our language? The Doomslayer's HUD had been processing their speech patterns since they'd arrived. His suit's translation protocols, designed to parse demon languages across Hell's infinite variations, rapidly constructing a linguistic model. He understood them perfectly. The question was whether he chose to respond. After a long moment, he gave a single, curt nod. O'Neill grinned. Well, that's progress. Strong and silent, but at least interactive. Okay, next question. Do you have a name? Or should we just call you that terrifying guy who blew up a Hatak? The Slayer's external speakers crackled, and for the first time since arriving in this universe, he attempted communication. His voice, distorted through the Praetor Suit speakers and filtered through a throat that hadn't needed to form words in centuries, emerged as a grinding, mechanical rasp. Slayer. The word hung in the air like a pronouncement of doom. Daniel swallowed hard. That's appropriately ominous. Slayer, O'Neill repeated, testing the name. Right. Well, Slayer, we've got a lot to talk about. Like where you came from, how you took down an entire fortress single-handed, and, most importantly, whether you're interested in helping us take down more Goa'uld. Because, buddy, if you fight like this all the time, we could really use you. The Doomslayer stared at O'Neill for a long moment, his visor's green glow unwavering. Then he turned and began walking toward the ruins, toward where his sensors detected the Stargate's unique energy signature. Is that a yes? Daniel called after him. I think that's a follow me if you want to live, O'Neill replied, slinging his P90 and starting after the armored figure. Carter, Daniel, Teal'c, let's go. Something tells me we just stumbled into the most dangerous alliance in galactic history. Or the most dangerous enemy, Carter muttered. But she followed nonetheless. Behind them, Anubis's fortress smoldered, a monument to what happens when unstoppable force meets false divinity. Above them, debris from a Hatak mothership rained down like judgment from the heavens. And ahead of them, the Doomslayer marched toward the Stargate, bringing with him a war that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. The Stargate lay half-buried under collapsed masonry, its massive metal ring tilted at a 45-degree angle but otherwise intact. The Doomslayer reached it first, his armored hands clearing aside debris with casual strength. The symbols along its inner rim were unfamiliar, but the technology's purpose was clear enough. A fixed-point teleporter with interstellar range. His suit's sensors mapped the device's power systems, identifying the control pedestal a few yards away. It's a Stargate, Carter explained, moving to the pedestal with her scanner. It creates a stable wormhole between two gates. You dial a 7-symbol address, 6 for destination, 1 for point of origin, and step through. The Goa'uld use them to control their empire. The Slayer gave a short, sharp nod. He understood transportation grids. Hell had them, though theirs were usually built from screaming souls and damned architecture. This was cleaner, more precise, but the principle was the same. A door to somewhere else, somewhere with more targets. Sir, Carter said, glancing at O'Neill. The gate's power source is depleted, probably drained during the fortress's destruction. We can't dial out without a new energy source. O'Neill looked at the Slayer. You wouldn't happen to have a spare ZPM on you, would you? No? Figured. The Slayer ignored him, examining the gate's construction. His HUD detected residual energy signatures, Naquata, as his database labeled it, the same material that powered the Hottox reactor. He turned, his gaze sweeping the ruins, until it settled on a piece of wreckage. A Goa'uld staff weapon, its power cell still glowing faintly. He retrieved it, crushed the weapon's housing in his fist, and extracted the crystalline power cell. Hey, careful with that, Carter warned. Those things can explode if... The Slayer shoved the power cell into the pedestal's primary energy port. The fit wasn't perfect, but his grip forced the connection. Sparks flew. The pedestal lit up, hieroglyphs glowing with amber light. The Stargate itself began to spin, its inner ring rotating with a heavy, grinding sound. Okay, O'Neill said, impressed. Or we can just brute force it. That works too. The seventh symbol locked with a deep thud. The event horizon erupted from the ring's center in a burst of blue energy that settled into a shimmering, vertical pool. The wormhole stabilized with a low hum. We didn't dial that, Daniel said, checking the pedestal. He must have input an address from memory. But how would he know a Stargate address? Maybe he doesn't, Carter said, studying her scanner. The gate just accepted the power cell's residual signature and connected to the last dialed destination. That would be Anubis's secondary base on P2X 338. It's a known staging ground for his Coal Warrior program. The Slayer stepped toward the event horizon. Whoa, hold on, O'Neill said, moving to block his path. We don't know what's on the other side. Could be an army, could be a trap. Standard procedure is to send a MALP through first, a remote probe to scout. The Slayer looked down at O'Neill. The message was clear. Standard procedure is for people who can die. He stepped through the event horizon. The sensation was peculiar, a rushing cold fluidity that lasted less than a second. Then he was through, emerging into a large, dimly lit chamber of polished black stone. The air was cold and carried the sterile scent of advanced environmental systems. His sensors immediately registered multiple life signs, energy shields, and the distinct hum of active technology. This was not a fortress. It was a laboratory. The chamber stretched for hundreds of yards, lined with rows of upright, translucent tanks. Each tank contained a suspended humanoid form. Coal warriors in various stages of development, their bodies connected to bundles of tubes and wires. Dozens of Jaffa technicians moved between the tanks, monitoring readouts on Goa'uld control consoles. At the chamber's far end, a massive view screen displayed genetic sequences and neural mapping data. The Slayer had stepped into the heart of Anubis's super soldier production facility. For a moment, nobody noticed him. Then, a Jaffa technician turned, saw the armored figure standing before the active Stargate, and froze. The technician's eyes went wide. He fumbled for his communication device. The Slayer raised the super shotgun. The first blast took the technician in the chest, throwing him backward into a control console. Alarms shrieked to life, red lighting flooding the chamber. Jaffa guards stationed at the perimeter snapped to attention, staff weapons rising. Technicians scrambled for cover. Behind the Slayer, the event horizon rippled as O'Neill, Teal'c, Carter, and Daniel emerged, weapons ready. They took in the scene instantly. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," O'Neill said, staring at the rows of Coal Warrior tanks. "Carter, please tell me these are decorative." "They're not decorative, sir. This is a production facility. Anubis is mass-producing them." "We have to destroy this place," Daniel said, horror in his voice. "This is This is an assembly line for slaves. Agreed, Teal'c said, his staff weapon coming up. But there are too many. We must retreat and call for reinforcements. The Slayer was already moving. He strode toward the nearest row of tanks, ignoring the staff fire that began to pepper his shields. The Jaffa guards were disciplined, forming firing lines, but they were laboratory security, not frontline warriors. Their shots went wide or dissipated harmlessly against the Praetor Suit. He reached the first tank and drove the crucible's blade through its base. The translucent material shattered, viscous fluid gushing across the floor. The half-formed Kull warrior inside spasmed, then went still as its life support failed. The Slayer moved to the next tank, and the next. He's terminating the subjects, Carter said, her voice conflicted. They're not subjects, Carter, O'Neill replied, firing his P-90 at a group of advancing Jaffa. They're corpses in waiting. He's putting them down before they wake up. He glanced at the Slayer's methodical destruction, brutal but efficient. The Jaffa guards charged, trying to protect the facility. Teal'c met them head-on, his staff weapon a blur of motion as he disarmed and disabled opponents with precise strikes. O'Neill and Carter provided covering fire, while Daniel hung back, documenting everything with his camera even as he kept his sidearm ready. The Slayer worked with terrifying speed. Tank after tank fell to the crucible or to point-blank shotgun blasts. Alchemical fluid mixed with spent shell casings on the polished floor. The chamber's primary lights failed, replaced by emergency strobes that cast jagged shadows across the slaughter. A reinforced door at the chamber's far end hissed open, and a new force entered. 10 Kull warriors, fully armed and armored. They moved with the same mechanical precision the Slayer had encountered on the Hatak, their disruptor rifles sweeping the room. "Oh, crap," O'Neill said. "Teal'c, fall back." Teal'c retreated to cover behind a console as disruptor fire tore it apart. Carter fired her Zat, but the energy discharge washed harmlessly over a Kull warrior's armor. "They're immune to energy weapons, sir. We need kinetic force." "We've got kinetic force," O'Neill said, nodding toward the Slayer. The Kull warriors had identified the primary threat. They ignored SG-1 entirely, focusing their fire on the armored figure wrecking their berthing tanks. Disruptor beams converged on the Slayer, and this time, the Praetor Suit's shields, still not fully recovered from the Hatak battle, began to fail. Warning indicators flashed. The Slayer didn't retreat. He charged. He crossed the distance in 3 bounding strides, the crucible trailing argent energy like a comet's tail. The lead Kull warrior fired. The Slayer sidestepped, the disruptor beam grazing his shoulder pauldron. He brought the crucible down in an overhead strike, splitting the warrior from helmet to pelvis. The two halves fell apart, spraying components across the floor. The remaining Kull warriors adapted, spreading out to avoid being caught in a single strike. They fired in staggered bursts, forcing the Slayer to keep moving. One beam struck his leg, overloading the local shield emitter. The armor plating beneath glowed red-hot. He ignored the damage, switching to the ballista, a massive energy weapon he'd retrieved from his interdimensional arsenal. He fired a charged shot that punched through 2 Kull warriors in a line, vaporizing their chests. "What the hell is that?" O'Neill yelled over the din. "Some kind of directed energy weapon, but it's not like anything the Goa'uld have," Carter shouted back. The Slayer was in his element now. He moved between the Kull warriors like a force of nature, his weapons switching seamlessly based on range and threat priority. The super shotgun for close quarters, the ballista for mid-range penetration, the crucible for when he wanted to make a statement. Each Kull warrior that fell made the next one easier to kill, as their tactical network lost nodes and their coordination frayed. Within 2 minutes, all 10 Kull warriors were dead. The remaining Jaffa technicians surrendered, throwing down their weapons and kneeling. O'Neill moved to secure them, while Carter and Daniel began placing explosive charges on the central control systems. "We need to collapse this facility," Carter said. "The Naquata reactors below us will chain react if we trigger them here and here." "Do it," O'Neill ordered. "Teal'c, help me round up these prisoners. We'll take them back through the gate." The Slayer stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving with exertion. His Hadi showed critical damage to his left leg servos and multiple shield emitters offline. The Praetor Suit's self-repair systems were working, but slowly. This universe lacked the ambient argent energy that usually accelerated the process. He turned his attention to the main view screen. It still displayed genetic data, schematics, star maps. His suit's recording systems captured everything, analyzing for patterns, for weaknesses, for locations. One image froze him. It was a planet, blue and green, with a familiar satellite orbiting it. Earth. Beside it, tactical assessments, population density, military capability, Stargate defense protocols. Anubis had been planning an invasion. A full-scale assault to crush the Tauri once and for all. The Slayer's visor fixed on the image. His grip tightened on the super shotgun. "You see it too, huh?" O'Neill said, coming up beside him. "Yeah, that's home. And that snakehead has been eyeing it for a while. We've stopped him before, but he keeps coming back with bigger guns and uglier soldiers." He looked at the Slayer. "You took out a Hatak by yourself. You just wiped out a Kull warrior production line. If you're looking for a target-rich environment, Earth could use a guy like you. On our side, preferably." The Slayer didn't respond. He was processing the tactical data. Anubis was the immediate threat, but the infestation was galactic. Thousands of worlds, millions of parasites. A crusade that could last centuries. But Earth was the humans' homeworld. They had fought the parasites. They had freed slaves. They were not hosts. Not yet. Carter finished setting the charges. "Sir, we have 10 minutes before detonation. We need to go." "Right. Slayer, you coming?" The Slayer looked at O'Neill, then at the Stargate. He gave a single nod. They retreated through the event horizon just as the first charges detonated. The wormhole collapsed behind them, cutting off the site of the laboratory's destruction. Back on P3X 888, O'Neill let out a long breath. Well, that was a productive field trip. Destroyed a super soldier factory, made a powerful new friend, and didn't die. I'm calling that a win. He turned to the Slayer. "Okay, big guy, you've seen what we're up against. You've seen what we can do together. What do you say we take this alliance back to Earth? Let you meet the rest of the team, maybe get that armor of yours patched up?" The Slayer stared at the now dormant Stargate. His mission was clear. Find Anubis. End him. Then move on to the next system lord, and the next, until the galaxy was cleansed. These humans could be useful. They had intelligence, resources. They understood the enemy's infrastructure. But they also had rules, restrictions, morals that could get in the way of total war. He looked at O'Neill and gave another nod, shorter this time. Agreement, for now. But not allegiance. Never allegiance. "Great," O'Neill said, clapping his hands together. "Carter, dial home. Let's introduce our new friend to General Hammond. This ought to be fun." As Carter dialed the Earth address, the Slayer watched the symbols lock. His HUD recorded the sequence. He would learn this transportation network. He would map the parasite strongholds. And then he would visit each one, bringing with him the only thing he'd ever been good at delivering: absolute, uncompromising violence. The event horizon stabilized. Through it, they could see the familiar interior of the SGC gate room, armed guards waiting in defensive positions. O'Neill led the way. "Welcome to Earth, Slayer. Try not to break anything." The Doom Slayer stepped through, into a new world and a new war. The SGC gate room was a controlled chaos of shouted orders, raised weapons, and palpable tension. The moment the Doomslayer stepped through the event horizon, 24 armed SF soldiers tightened their grips on their P90s, their training warring with the instinctive fear that the armored being inspired. General Hammond's voice boomed from the control room overlook. "Stand down. Hold your fire." The soldiers held their positions, fingers off triggers, but eyes locked on the new arrival. The Slayer stopped at the base of the ramp, his armored form seeming to absorb the fluorescent light. He scanned the room with a slow, deliberate turn of his helmet. The concrete walls, the ballistic glass of the control room, the rows of computer terminals, the humans in uniform who stared back with a mixture of awe and terror. No gold emblems, no staff weapons, just military discipline and technology that, to his sensors, seemed quaint. O'Neill stepped through after him, raising his hands. "Easy, everyone. He's with us, for now." Carter, Daniel, and Teals followed. The Stargate shut down with a violent splash of energy. "Colonel O'Neill," General Hammond said, descending the stairs from the control room. His eyes never left the Slayer. "Report." "General, meet, well, he calls himself the Slayer. He single-handedly destroyed Anubis's fortress on P3X 888, then boarded and scuttled his Hatak in orbit. After that, we followed him to a Cool Warrior production facility on P2X 338, which he also helped us destroy." O'Neill shrugged. "He's strong, silent, and really doesn't like Goa'uld." Hammond approached cautiously. "Can he understand me?" The Slayer gave a single, sharp nod. "Very well. I am General George Hammond of the United States Air Force. You are in the Stargate Command Facility on Earth. We appreciate your assistance against our common enemy." He paused, choosing his words. "We would like to discuss an alliance." The Slayer's helmet tilted slightly. The mechanical growl from his external speakers was low, non-committal. "Sir," Carter interjected, "his armor and weapons technology are beyond anything we've encountered. I'd like permission to run non-invasive scans, with his cooperation, to better understand his capabilities and, well, to make sure he's not a threat to the base." "Denied, Major," Hammond said firmly. "Our guest has demonstrated his intentions through action. We will not treat him as a specimen." He looked back at the Slayer. "You are welcome here as an ally. We can offer shelter, logistical support, and intelligence on Goa'uld operations. In return, we ask for your continued assistance in combat operations against the System Lords." The Slayer stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then he pointed a gauntleted finger at Teal'c. Daniel adjusted his glasses nervously. "He's concerned about Teal'c, about the symbiote. I'm not a Goa'uld," Teal'c stated, his voice steady. "My symbiote is immature. It grants me strength and longevity, but I control my own mind. I fight to free the Jaffa from slavery." The Slayer took a step toward Teal'c. The SF soldiers shifted, weapons rising a fraction of an inch. O'Neill moved between them, hands up. "Whoa, okay. Let's all just take a breath. Slayer, Teal'c has been with us for years. He's saved Earth more times than I can count. He's on our side." The Slayer's sensors were analyzing Teal'c's physiology. The symbiote's energy signature, the neural interface, the biochemical markers. It was a parasite, yes. But the host's brain activity showed no signs of external control. Autonomy was evident in every micro-expression, every voluntary movement. The data was contradictory to everything in his combat database. After a tense silence, the Slayer lowered his hand. He turned to Hammond and gave a curt nod. "I'll take that as a yes to the alliance," Hammond said, relief subtle in his voice. "Colonel, Show our guest to the VIP quarters. Get him whatever he needs. Dismissed. The VIP quarters were a standard officer's room, sparse and utilitarian. The Slayer stood in the center, unmoving, as O'Neill leaned in the doorway. So, make yourself at home. There's a bathroom through there. Cafeteria's down the hall if you get hungry. We'll probably have a briefing in a few hours once we've debriefed. He paused. You don't actually eat, do you? The Slayer didn't respond. Right. Silent treatment. Got it. O'Neill left, the door hissing shut. Alone, the Slayer finally powered down his weapon systems. The Praetor Suit's diagnostics scrolled across his HUD. Damage was significant. Left leg actuator at 43% efficiency, shield matrix regeneration stalled at 62%, multiple superficial armor breaches. The suit's self-repair nanites were active, but they were designed to feed on Argent energy. This universe had none. The process would be slow. He accessed the suit's internal logs, replaying the battle data from the Hatak. The Kull Warrior's disruptor technology was noteworthy. It had penetrated his shields where staff weapons had failed. His systems isolated the energy frequency, began formulating adaptive countermeasures. By the next engagement, his shields would be tuned to resist it. A soft chime sounded at the door. It slid open without his acknowledgement. Major Samantha Carter stood there, holding a tablet. She looked apprehensive. I'm sorry to intrude. General Hammond authorized me to ask if you would permit a scan of your armor's exterior. No invasive procedures. We just want to understand the material science. It could help our own research into personal shielding. The Slayer considered her. Her posture was open, non-threatening. Her eyes held scientific curiosity, not greed or malice. After a moment, he gave a single nod. Carter smiled. Thank you. She stepped into the room, holding up a handheld scanner. This is a Naquadah-enhanced spectrometer. It won't penetrate your armor, just analyze surface composition and energy emissions. She began a slow walk around him, the scanner whirring softly. Data streamed across her tablet. Her eyes widened. This is incredible. The crystalline composite structure is unlike anything in our database. It's self-organizing at the molecular level. And the energy weave beneath it, it's not just absorbing impacts, it's converting kinetic energy into something else. Storing it, maybe. She looked up at his visor. Where did you get this technology? The Slayer remained silent. Right, sorry. Classified. She continued scanning. Your weapons manifest from interdimensional pockets. The energy signatures are consistent across devices, but the underlying principle, it's not Naquadah, not neutronium, not anything we've cataloged. It's something entirely new. She finished her scan and stepped back, studying her tablet with a frown. Your suit is damaged. The self-repair systems are active, but they're struggling, like they're missing a fuel source. The Slayer looked at her. He raised his right arm, and a holographic display projected from his gauntlet, a schematic of the Praetor Suit, with damage highlighted in red. Carter leaned in, her scientist's mind instantly engaging. Fascinating. The repair systems are biomechanical. They use a form of cellular regeneration, but it's powered by an external energy type. She tapped her chin. We have Naquadah generators. We could try to jury-rig a compatible power interface. It might accelerate the process. She met his visor's glow. Would you allow me to try? I can't promise it'll work, but I think I can help. The offer was logical, pragmatic. It would restore his combat efficiency faster. He nodded. Okay, I'll need to bring some equipment in here. I'll be back in 10 minutes. She turned to leave, then stopped. And thank you for trusting me. After she left, The Slayer accessed the SGC's internal network. His suit's systems had been passively sniffing data traffic since his arrival. He bypassed the primitive firewalls with ease, diving into mission reports, intelligence briefings, star maps. He found the file on Anubis, the half-ascended Goa'uld, a being who had accessed ancient knowledge, who had returned from dissolution, who commanded not just ships and armies, but technologies that bent reality. The files spoke of a prior attempted attack on Earth, stopped by SG-1, of a search for an ancient weapon known as the Eye of Ra, of plans within plans. Anubis was not just another demon to be slain. He was a strategic threat, a thinker, a planner. The Slayer's focus narrowed. The crusade was still galactic, but the first head of the serpent needed to be removed. Anubis. Then the other system lords would fall into disarray. They would be easier to hunt. Carter returned with a cart of equipment, a small Naquata generator, cabling, and an assortment of sensor probes. She worked with quiet efficiency, connecting cables to a universal interface she'd fabricated on the spot. This might feel strange, she warned, attaching a probe to a service port on his chest plate. Energy surged into the Praetor Suit. It was wrong. Cold and inert compared to the roaring, living fire of Argent energy. But it was power. His suit systems recognized it as a viable substitute, began converting it, funneling it into the damaged sectors. Repair rates jumped from 1.2% per hour to 17% per hour. Carter monitored the readings on her tablet. It's working. The suit is adapting the Naquata energy. Incredible. The conversion efficiency is nearly 98%. No technology we have can do that. The Slayer felt the actuators in his left leg reset, the servos humming back to full strength. Shield emitters recalibrated. The armor's outer plating began to seal its microfractures, the crystalline structure reknitting itself. You'll be back at full capacity in a few hours, Carter said, smiling. Then her expression grew serious. Can I ask you something? Why are you doing this? The Goa'uld have never encountered anything like you. You could go anywhere, but you're here, helping us. The Slayer looked at her. He raised a fist, then slowly opened it. The gesture was simple, but the meaning was clear. They hold worlds in their grip. I break that grip. Carter nodded slowly. We've been fighting them for years. We've lost good people. Sometimes it feels like we're just containing the infection, not curing it. She met his visor. Maybe together, we can do more than contain it. An alarm blared through the base. Red lights began to flash. Carter's radio crackled. Carter to the control room, unscheduled off-world activation. She grabbed her equipment. Come on. In the control room, the mood was tense. The Stargate was active, its event horizon rippling. The IDC signal came through, a Jaffa resistance code but laced with a distress beacon. It's from the planet Dakara, Teal'c said, his voice tight. The site of the ancient Jaffa rebellion. Someone is calling for help. Who? Hammond asked. The signal is from Bratek, my former mentor. But the encryption is wrong. It is a trap. Anubis, O'Neill stated. On the gate room floor, the Slayer watched the shimmering pool. His sensors detected no outgoing matter stream. No one was coming through. It was a one-way connection, broadcasting only. Then a voice echoed through the gate room, smooth, resonant, and dripping with malice. It was Anubis. Tauri, and my unexpected guest, I have been observing you. You destroyed my fortress, my ship, my laboratory. You have proven irritating. The Slayer took a step toward the gate. I know what you are, Anubis continued. Or rather, I know what you are not. You are not of this reality. Your power is alien. Interesting. I have studied the rift you emerged from. The energies are chaotic, primordial. I believe I can replicate them. A video feed superimposed itself over the event horizon. It showed Bratak, beaten and bloodied, held between two cool warriors. Behind him, a massive device hummed with power. A larger, more complex version of the dimensional rift generator from P3X-888. I am on Dakara. I have here the last of the Jaffa Resistance Council. I also have the means to open a doorway back to your dimension, warrior. Or perhaps to others. The possibilities are endless. Anubis's tone grew cold. You will come to Dakara. You will surrender yourself and your technology for study. If you do not, I will open a permanent rift to a dimension of pure entropy and aim it at Earth. Your new allies will be unmade at the atomic level. The transmission cut. The Stargate shut down. Silence hung in the control room. He's bluffing, Daniel said, but without conviction. He's half ancient, Carter countered. He has knowledge we don't. If anyone could weaponize a dimensional tear, it's him. Hammond turned to O'Neill. Options, Colonel. We can't ignore the threat, and we can't hand the Slayer over. O looked at the armored figure. This is your call, big guy. He's baiting you. The Slayer was already moving. He strode to the control console, ignoring the technicians, and placed his gauntlet on the interface. His systems hacked the dialing computer in seconds. The Stargate began to spin. He's dialing Dakara, Carter said. Slayer, wait, O'Neill called. It's a trap. He'll have the whole planet fortified. The Slayer didn't pause. The seventh symbol locked. The gate engaged. He turned to face SG-1. He pointed at them, then pointed at the gate. The meaning was clear. Follow if you wish. Then he raised his fist and brought it down slowly, decisively, onto the console. The gesture was a vow, a promise of annihilation. He turned and walked into the event horizon, alone. O'Neill sighed, grabbing his P90. Well, you heard the man. Suit up. We're going to war. Teal'c hefted his staff weapon. He fights with the fury of a god, but he fights alone. That is a weakness Anubis will exploit. Then we make sure he's not alone, Carter said, checking her Zat. Daniel adjusted his vest. What's the plan? O'Neill looked at the active gate. The plan is we go in, kill the bad guys, blow up the superweapon, and save the day. Standard stuff. He grinned, though it didn't reach his eyes. And try not to get stepped on by our new friend. One by one, they followed the Slayer into the blue. On Dakara, Anubis waited, and the Doom Slayer descended upon him like judgment from a hostile heaven. Dakara was a world of dust and dead history. The Stargate stood in a broad valley flanked by towering, wind-carved cliffs of red stone. Ancient Jaffa ruins, temples and fortresses from the First Rebellion, lay half buried in the sand, their grandeur reduced to skeletal remnants by millennia of neglect. The air was still and thin, carrying the metallic scent of ozone and the deeper, colder smell of active ancient technology. The Doomslayer emerged from the gate at a full sprint, his boots kicking up plumes of red dust. His sensors mapped the terrain in real time. The valley stretched for 5 miles, ending at a massive stepped pyramid that was not of Goa'uld design. It was older, plainer, built from blocks of black stone that seemed to swallow the weak sunlight. The energy signature emanating from it was immense, familiar, and wrong. It was the same chaotic frequency as the rift that had pulled him here, but amplified, stabilized, and aimed like a spear. Anubis's voice boomed from hidden speakers, echoing across the valley. Welcome. I have prepared a reception worthy of your legend. From behind every ruin, from camouflaged pits in the ground, from the cliff faces themselves, soldiers emerged. Not just Jaffa, not just cool warriors. Something new. They were humanoid, but their movements were utterly silent, synchronized to a degree that surpassed even the cool. Their armor was matte gray, faceless, and they carried weapons that looked like hybrids of staff technology and something more organic, more malignant. "My latest design," Anubis's voice purred. "I call them revenants, imprinted with the neural patterns of the galaxy's most ruthless warriors, downloaded into cloned bodies. They feel no pain, they know no fear, and they exist only to kill you." The revenants moved, 200 of them, advancing in a perfect spreading formation that cut off all avenues of retreat. They didn't charge. They flowed like water or shadow, their weapons rising as one. The Slayer's response was immediate. He fired the newly charged plasma rifle, green bolts of superheated matter tearing into the front rank. The Revenant's armor dispersed the energy, the hit soldiers staggering but not falling. They returned fire. Their weapons discharged not bolts of plasma, but beams of concentrated, sickly yellow energy that corroded what they touched. Where they struck the sand, it vitrified into poisonous green glass. One beam grazed the Slayer's shoulder, and his shields flared, dropping 5% instantly. The energy was acidic, clinging, trying to eat through his defenses. Adapt. He switched tactics. The super shotgun roared, and at close range, the kinetic force was still king. The blast lifted a revenant off its feet, its chest plate caving in. It hit the ground and did not move. Good. They could be killed. He was among them then, the crucible, a blinding arc of argent light in the dusty gloom. He carved through their ranks, each strike dismembering or bisecting. But they learned fast. They began to dodge, to anticipate, moving with a hive-mind intelligence that was unnerving. They flanked him, their corrosive beams striking from multiple angles, whittling down his shields. Behind him, the Stargate engaged again. O'Neill, Teal'c, Carter, and Daniel emerged, taking cover behind a crumbling wall. "What the hell are those?" O'Neill yelled, firing his P90. The bullets sparked off the Revenant's armor. "New models," Carter shouted back, analyzing with her scanner. "Their energy signatures are all wrong. It's like they're powered by a synthetic version of that rift energy." A Revenant turned its weapon on their position. Teal'c fired his staff weapon, the blast knocking the creature back but not down. Daniel's Zat shot was completely ineffective. "We're not equipped for this," Daniel cried. The Slayer saw them struggling. He disengaged from the immediate melee, leaping backwards with a burst from his thrusters. He landed near their cover, turning his back to them and raising his arms. A hemisphere of green energy erupted from the Praetor Suit, the Sentinel armor's mobile shield ability, a last-ditch defensive matrix. The Revenant's corrosive beams struck it and sizzled out. "Temporary," his distorted voice grated through the speakers. "Understood," Carter said. "We'll provide supporting fire. Aim for the joints. The armor is thinnest there." O'Neill nodded, switching to controlled bursts. "You heard the lady. Surgical fire." The shield lasted 15 seconds. In that time, SG-1's concentrated fire crippled 3 Revenants. Their legs or weapon arms shattered. The moment the shield dropped, the Slayer was moving again, a blur of violence that targeted the wounded ones first, finishing them with brutal glory kills. With each kill, his suit absorbed the strange, synthetic life force, converting it. His shield regeneration rate ticked upwards. He was adapting to their energy signature. But there were too many. For every Revenant that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place, pouring from hidden bunkers within the pyramid. The Slayer was holding the line, but he was being pushed back, toward the base of the cliff. Anubis was bleeding him dry, testing him, wasting his energy before the main event. "This is a delaying action," Teal'c called, slamming a fresh power cell into his staff weapon. He seeks to weary you before you reach the temple. The Slayer knew this. He'd seen the tactic in hell, lesser demons thrown in endless waves to soften up a target for the greater evil. He wouldn't be worn down. He changed weapons. The chain gun spun to life with a deafening whine, its barrel glowing. He unleashed a storm of high-caliber, armor-piercing rounds. The sheer volume of fire chewed through the revenant ranks, tearing them apart in sprays of synthetic flesh and shattered metal. He began to advance. The chain guns roared, drowning out all other sound, walking forward into the hail of corrosive beams as if they were rain. His shields fluctuated but held, constantly replenished by the life force of the fallen. He's pushing them back, Daniel said in awe. Then we push with him, O'Neill ordered. They moved as a unit, a diamond formation with the Slayer at the tip. He was the spearhead, the unstoppable force. They were the shaft, protecting his flanks, picking off the revenants that tried to encircle him. Carter used grenades to blow apart clusters. Teal used his staff weapon as a blunt instrument in close quarters. Daniel provided targeting data, pointing out weaknesses he spotted with an archaeologist's eye for structural flaw. They reached the base of the Black Pyramid. A massive entrance, 50 feet tall, yawned before them, sealed by an energy barrier that shimmered with the same sickly yellow as the Revenant's weapons. The barrier is keyed to that anomalous energy, Carter reported, scanning it. Our weapons won't touch it. The Slayer examined it. His HUD analyzed the frequency. It was a crude, brute force imitation of Hell's dimensional walls. He raised the ballista, charged it to maximum, and fired. The arcing, argent-powered projectile struck the barrier. Instead of breaking, the barrier absorbed it, rippling violently, growing brighter. It's feeding on the energy, Carter warned. It's getting stronger. Anubis's laugh echoed. You cannot breach this with force, warrior. It is designed to consume the very power you wield. A fitting end, devoured by your own strength. The Slayer lowered the ballista. He looked at the barrier, then at his own hands. He remembered the forges of hell, the seals that could only be broken not by greater power, but by its absolute absence, by negation. He deactivated all his weapon systems. The runes on his armor dimmed. He walked directly up to the crackling energy field. Slayer, don't! O'Neill shouted. He placed his bare gauntlet against the barrier. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a reverse reaction began. The barrier wasn't being fed, it was being unmade. Where his armor touched it, the yellow energy writhed, darkened, and crumbled into nothingness, like ash in a wind. The Praetor Suit, born in the fires of a dimension of pure chaos, was anathema to this pale imitation. It didn't overpower the barrier, it denied its very existence. A hole tore open, spreading rapidly until the entire barrier dissolved, with a sound like shattering glass. How? Carter breathed. The Slayer didn't answer. He reactivated his systems and strode into the darkness of the pyramid. Inside, the architecture shifted from stone to sleek, organic-looking metal. Ancient technology, corrupted by Goa'uld and Anubis's own twisted research. The corridor sloped downwards, deep into the planet's crust. The air grew colder, thick with the hum of immense machines. They encountered no more soldiers. The path was clear, a straight line to the heart, a gauntlet thrown down. They descended for what felt like miles. Finally, the corridor opened into a cavernous chamber that took even the Slayer's senses a moment to process. It was a cathedral of machinery. In the center stood the rift generator, a colossal ring of black stone and glowing blue crystals, twice the size of the Stargate. Energy crackled within its circumference, showing a terrifying vista of a swirling gray void. a dimension of pure entropy. Bratak and a handful of other Jaffa were held in force cages along one wall. And standing before the generator on an elevated platform was Anubis. He wore no golden armor now, only simple black robes. His eyes glowed with cold, ascended light. Behind him stood 10 Kull warriors, but these were different. Larger, their armor was inscribed with glowing runes, and they crackled with the same unstable energy as the rift. "You are as impressive as the legends you will inspire," Anubis said, his voice no longer amplified, yet carrying perfectly in the vast space. "You have shattered every defense I placed before you. You have adapted to every weapon. You are the perfect warrior." He spread his hands. "Join me. This power I harness, it is but a shadow of what exists in other reality. Together, we could open doorways to dimensions of limitless energy, infinite conquest. You could have an entire universe of demons to slay." The Slayer's answer was to raise the super shotgun. Anubis sighed. "A shame. Then you will die, and I will strip your armor from your corpse and learn its secrets regardless." He gestured. The 10 enhanced Kull warriors, ruin guards, his HUD labeled them, leaped from the platform, landing with earth-shaking impacts. They raised weapons that were fused to their arms, cannons that glowed with the entropy of the rift. "The rest of you," Anubis said, glancing at SG-1, "are irrelevant." The ruin guards opened fire. Not beams, but spheres of annihilating gray light that erased matter where they passed. One shot struck a support column, and a 10-foot section of it simply ceased to be. "Don't let that hit you," Carter yelled, diving for cover. The Slayer charged the nearest guard. It swung a massive fist, and he ducked under it, driving the crucible up into its armpit. The argent blade met the corrupted energy of the guard and sparked violently, struggling to cut. The guard backhanded him, sending him skidding across the floor. His shields dropped 20%. These were different, stronger, infused with power that resisted his own. He got to his feet as the guards surrounded him. He switched to the BFG 9000, his last shot. He fired. The green sphere shot forward, its tendrils latching onto the ruin guards. It detonated. The explosion filled the chamber. When it cleared, 3 ruin guards were gone, vaporized. 4 others were severely damaged, missing limbs or leaking energy. 3 remained fully functional. The BFG had worked, but it was empty now. Anubis watched, intrigued. "Fascinating. That weapon taps into a fundamental force my science cannot quantify." The remaining functional guards pressed the attack. The Slayer fought with controlled fury, using the environment. He kicked a damaged guard into the path of an entropy sphere, watching it unravel. He used his meat hook to grapple onto a ceiling strut, swinging out of reach of a crushing blow, then dropping down to drive his armored fist through a guard's helmet. But they were wearing him down. His armor was scored and smoking. A lucky hit from an entropy sphere clipped his leg, and the servos locked up for a terrifying second before rebooting. From the side, SG-1 was fighting their own battle. Teal'c and O'Neill were focusing fire on one guard's leg, trying to cripple it. Carter was attempting to hack into the generator's control console. Daniel was working to free Bratak and the others from the force cages. "The controls are shielded," Carter called. "I can't access the shutdown sequence." The Slayer, in the middle of ripping the arm cannon off a ruin guard, saw her struggle. He threw the severed cannon like a javelin. It smashed into the console Carter was working on, shattering its casing and spilling out crystalline components. "Or we can do it that way," Carter said, immediately diving into the exposed wiring. The last fully functional ruin guard lunged at the Slayer, its remaining cannon arm aimed point blank at his chest. He couldn't dodge. A staff weapon blast struck the guard in the side of the head. It wasn't enough to damage it, but it was enough to make it flinch. Teal'c stood there, staff raised, having drawn its attention. "Over here!" O'Neill yelled, firing a full clip into its back. The distraction was all the Slayer needed. He surged forward, grabbed the guard's cannon arm, and with a roar of straining servos, he bent it backwards, pointing it at the guard's own chest. The weapon discharged. The entropy sphere consumed its creator from the inside out. Silence fell, broken only by the hum of the unstable rift. All the ruin guards were destroyed. The Slayer, battered but unbroken, turned his visor toward the platform, toward Anubis. The half-ascended Goa'uld was no longer smiling. A remarkable performance, but ultimately pointless. He raised a hand toward the rift generator. The sequence is irreversible. In 60 seconds, the containment will collapse, and the entropy rift will be projected through the Stargate to Earth. You have lost. Carter looked up from the shattered console, her face pale. He's right. The core is in a feedback loop. I can't stop it from here. Daniel had freed Bratak. The old Jaffa leaned on him, but his eyes were fierce. The weapon must be destroyed from within the control nexus, inside the generator itself. Everyone looked at the raging rift within the giant ring. Stepping into that was suicide. It would unravel any matter instantly. The Slayer looked at the rift. He looked at his armor. He looked at Anubis. He made his decision. He sprinted toward the generator, not away from it. "Slayer, no!" O'Neill shouted. He didn't stop. With a final, mighty leap, he plunged into the crackling surface of the entropy rift and disappeared. Anubis stared, stunned. He sacrificed himself? Inside the rift, the Doomslayer experienced nothingness. It was not the fiery pain of hell, but the cold, absolute negation of being. His armor screamed in protest. His shields evaporated. His HUD flickered with catastrophic failure warnings. But at the center of the rift, he saw it. The control nexus, a pulsing crystalline heart, the source of the field. He was unraveling. He could feel it. But he had faced oblivion before, in the heart of the icon of sin, in the throne room of the Dark Lord. Rip, he swung the crucible. The blade, fueled by his own indomitable will, as much as argent energy, cut into the nexus and tear. The crystal shattered. The rift collapsed inwards with a sound like the universe gasping. The generator's ring exploded outwards in a shower of molten fragments. The Slayer was thrown clear, a burning armored comet arcing through the air. He smashed into the far wall of the chamber and slid down into a heap of twisted metal and sparking components. He did not move. The hum of the machine died. The chamber was silent, lit only by fires and failing consoles. Anubis stared at the wreckage, then at the motionless Slayer. A slow, triumphant smile spread across his face. And so, the legend ends, not in glory, but in silence. He raised his hand, ready to disintegrate the body and claim his prize. A green light flickered in the pile of rubble. A low, grinding, mechanical growl echoed through the chamber. The Doomslayer stood up. His armor was shattered in places, hanging off in others. One of his helmet's optic lenses was cracked. Smoke rose from his chassis. But in his hand, the crucible still burned, and his remaining eye lens fixed on Anubis with undiminished, absolute fury. He took a step forward, then another. Anubis took a step back. For the first time, true fear touched the half-ascended being's eyes. The Doomslayer had walked through the void that unmade worlds, and he was still coming. The crucible's hum was the only sound in the shattered chamber. It wasn't the clean, resonant tone of a fully charged blade, but a sputtering, staticky crackle, the sound of a weapon clinging to function through sheer willpower. Argent energy flickered along its length, unstable and wild. The Doomslayer advanced. Each step was labored, the servos in his damaged leg whining in protest. The left side of his helmet was a web of cracks, one lens dark. His armor was a ruin of scorched composite and exposed wiring, with the Praetor Suit's self-repair systems overwhelmed, throwing frantic, unheeded warnings across his flickering HUD. He was running on biological redundancy now, on the enhancements baked into his bones and sinews by the divinity machine, on the rage that had fueled an eon of genocide. Anubis stood his ground, but the aura of detached, godlike superiority had evaporated. The half-ascended Goa'uld's eyes burned with a mix of fury, fascination, and a dawning, primal fear. This being should be dead. It had been unmade by fundamental forces. It had walked into the heart of entropy and walked back out. Impossible, Anubis hissed, the word devoid of its usual resonance. The rift consumes all matter, all energy. The Slayer didn't offer an explanation. He didn't have one that would fit into Anubis's understanding of physics. He had survived because he had survived hell. He had survived because his purpose was not yet complete. Some laws were stronger than entropy. "Sir, we have to help him." Carter's voice was strained from across the chamber. She and O'Neill were helping Bratak and the freed Jaffa to their feet, all of them staring at the confrontation. "How, Carter?" O'Neill's P-90 was trained on Anubis, but his expression was grim. "We shoot, we might just piss him off, and I don't think our friend wants interference." Teal'c stood ready, staff weapon raised, his face a mask of solemn respect. "He has chosen his battle. We must honor it." Anubis raised his hands, not in surrender, but in a gesture of power. Blue-white energy, the cold fire of his ascended knowledge, coalesced around his fingers. "You are a fascinating specimen, a wound in reality. I will dissect what remains of you, neuron by neuron." He unleashed the energy. It wasn't a beam, but a wave, a distortion of space that rushed forward, intending to freeze, to analyze, to deconstruct at a subatomic level. The Slayer crossed the crucible before him. The unstable argent blade met the ascended energy. The collision didn't produce an explosion, but a terrifying silence, followed by a spatial tear. The air between them fractured like broken glass, revealing fleeting glimpses of swirling, non-Euclidean geometries before snapping back into place. The wave dissipated, but the crucible's light dimmed further. Anubis flinched, a flicker of pain crossing his features. The feedback had hurt him. Good. The Slayer charged. It wasn't the blinding sprint from before, but a relentless, limping advance, like a glacier made of hatred. Anubis teleported, a flicker of golden light, and he reappeared 30 feet to the left, firing another deconstruction wave. The Slayer anticipated it. He'd fought beings who moved through dimensions. He pivoted, his damaged leg buckling slightly, and raised his left arm. The equipment launcher fired not a grenade, but the last of his ice bombs, a containment field stolen from Maker technology. The globe of freezing energy struck the spot where Anubis materialized. The half-ascended Goa'uld cried out as the temporal stasis field encased his lower half, freezing him in place for a crucial second. It wouldn't hold him. He was already breaking the bonds with pulses of ascended power. But a second was enough. The Slayer covered the distance. He didn't use the crucible. He dropped it, the blade deactivating and clattering to the floor. He closed his armored fists. Anubis broke free, his face a mask of outrage. "You dare!" The Slayer's first punch took him in the jaw. It was a sound that didn't belong in the chamber of a god, the wet, solid crunch of fist meeting flesh and bone. Anubis's head snapped back. He stumbled, glowing eyes wide with shock. The physical blow had connected. The ascended shielding, designed to deflect energy and matter manipulation, had done nothing against the pure, unadulterated kinetic force driven by immortal rage. You strike me?" Anubis spat, a trickle of iridescent, energy-infused blood leaking from his lip. The Slayer's answer was a second punch to the gut, doubling the false god over. A third, an uppercut that lifted Anubis off his feet. This was not combat as the Goa'uld understood it. This was not energy weapons or fleet engagements or strategic intrigue. This was violence in its most primal, personal form. A beating. Anubis teleported away again, reappearing on the central platform near the wrecked generator. His robes were disheveled, his composure shattered. He raised both hands, and the very chamber responded. Chunks of machinery tore free from the walls, levitating and hurtling toward the Slayer like guided missiles. The Slayer didn't dodge. He waded through them. A piece of conduit smashed against his shoulder. He shrugged it off. A crystal shard pierced his thigh plating. He ripped it out and kept walking. He was a mountain weathering a storm of scrap metal. Anubis screamed in frustration, a raw, unbecoming sound. He focused his power not on projectiles, but on the Slayer's armor itself. He sought to unravel it, to reverse engineer its existence, to make it never was. The Praetor Suit groaned. Damaged sections began to flake away, dissolving into motes of light. The Slayer felt the assault not as pain, but as a chilling numbness, a sense of being erased. He pushed forward, the distance closing. 10 feet. 5. With a final, desperate motion, Anubis conjured a blade of solidified light, a weapon of pure thought, and lunged. The Slayer caught the blade in his bare hand. The light blade sizzled, cutting into his gauntlet, burning through to the flesh beneath. He didn't let go. With his other hand, he grabbed Anubis by the front of his robes. He pulled the half-ascended Goa'uld close, their faces inches apart, the cracked, emotionless visor meeting the glowing, terrified eyes. For a moment, they were frozen there, the unstoppable force and the immovable, terrified object. Then the Slayer headbutted him. Anubis's head cracked against the deck. The light blade vanished. The Slayer stood over him, one foot pinning his chest. He raised his fist again, the armor smoking, the flesh beneath bleeding and burned. "Wait!" The voice was Daniel's, frantic. He was running forward, Bratak holding him back. "Slayer, stop! If you kill him like this, if you just obliterate him, he'll just come back. He's half-ascended. He exists in a higher plane. You have to trap him, contain him. You can't just punch him out of existence." The Slayer's fist hovered. His head turned slightly, the single functional lens regarding Daniel. "Daniel's right," Carter called, her mind racing. "His consciousness is partially non-corporeal. Physical destruction might not be permanent. We need to force his energy form into a containment vessel." Anubis laughed, a wet, pained gurgle. "You see? You are a brute, a weapon. You lack the understanding to truly defeat me." The Slayer looked down at the being beneath his foot. He saw the arrogance, the cruelty, the parasitic nature that had infested this galaxy. He saw a demon wearing a more sophisticated mask. He reached down with his wounded hand, ignoring the pain, and clamped it over Anubis's forehead. "What are you doing?" Anubis gasped, struggling. "You cannot." The Slayer wasn't listening. He was focusing. He had absorbed the life force of demons for millennia. He had consumed the essence of Hell's lords. The process was not just nutritional. It was assertive. It was a denial of the other's right to exist, made manifest. He began to pull. Anubis screamed. This was not a scream of pain, but of existential terror. A glowing, ethereal form, a shimmering, serpentine echo of the Goa'uld within, began to be drawn from the host body. It was Anubis's ascended aspect, his consciousness, the part of him that existed beyond flesh. "No! Stop!" the energy form shrieked, its voice echoing in their minds, not their ears. "You cannot contain me. I am infinite." The Slayer's grip tightened. His will was a singularity, a gravitational pull on the spirit. He was not containing it in a vessel. He was pulling it into himself, into the same metaphysical space where he stored the screams of slain demons, the echoes of fallen titans. "Slayer, don't!" Carter yelled, horrified. "You don't know what that energy will do to you. It could overwrite your consciousness." He didn't care. It was a risk. But it was a permanent solution. He would not let this parasite escape. He would not let it return. With a final, wrenching pull, the glowing essence of Anubis was torn free from its host. The physical body, a human man with vacant eyes, went limp. The energy form thrashed and howled in the Slayer's grasp, a being of pure malice and intellect, now reduced to prey. The Slayer opened his mouth behind his helmet. He didn't breathe it in. He consumed it. The glowing energy streamed into him, drawn into the furnace of his own soul. The chamber echoed with a final, fading psychic shriek. Then silence. The Slayer stood over the empty host body, his form shuddering once, violently. Inside him, a war was being waged. The ascended consciousness of Anubis, desperate and insane, raged against the immutable fortress of the Slayer's will. It was a battle fought in the silence of his own mind, a psychic landscape of fire and ice. On the outside, he swayed, then steadied himself. He looked at his hands. For a second, faint, ghostly blue energy crackled over his armor before being snuffed out, absorbed, subsumed by the endless, roaring dark of his own fury. It was over. He turned. SG-1 and the freed Jaffa stared at him, utterly speechless. The magnitude of what they had just witnessed, not just a physical defeat, but a spiritual devouring, left them reeling. O'Neill lowered his weapon slowly. Okay, that happened. Daniel sank to his knees, overwhelmed. He just ate his soul. Teal'c bowed his head, a profound gesture of respect from a former First Prime. He has done what none could. He has not just slain a god, he has erased him. Carter approached cautiously, her scanner beeping erratically. Your biosigns are chaotic, but stabilizing. How do you feel? The Slayer looked at her. He didn't answer. He didn't know how to articulate the sensation of having a half-ascended cosmic parasite dissolving in the acid of his vengeance. He felt full and angrier. He bent down, picked up the deactivated crucible hilt, and attached it to his back. The movement was slow, pained, but deliberate. The mission was not over. Anubis was gone, but the Goa'uld Empire remained. The infestation was galactic. Bratak limped forward, supported by a younger Jaffa. He looked at the Slayer with an ancient, weary awe. You have given us a chance. The system lords will be in chaos. Anubis was the greatest threat, but also the one holding many factions in check. There will be war among them. And the Jaffa rebellion. We can use this. The Slayer gave a single nod. He understood power vacuums. They were opportunities. O'Neill walked up to him, looking him up and down. You're a mess, you know that? We need to get you back to Earth. Get Carter and her nerd squad to fix you up. He paused, his tone turning serious. And we need to talk about what happens next. You just changed the balance of power in this galaxy. We need to figure out what that means. The Slayer looked toward the chamber's exit, toward the surface, toward the Stargate. His sensors, even damaged, could pick up the tremors of hyperspace signatures. Ships were coming. News traveled fast. He started walking, not waiting for them. His path was clear. He had come to this universe by accident. He had found a nest of parasites masquerading as gods. He had slain their greatest champion. Now, he would cleanse the rest. As he walked past the ruined generator, past the broken bodies of revenants and ruined guards, one thought burned with perfect crystalline clarity in a mind that now housed the fading screams of a would-be god. The hunting was good here. The return to the SGC was a somber, shell-shocked procession. They emerged from the Dakara Stargate into a gate room on high alert, medical teams waiting. The freed Jaffa resistance members were escorted to the infirmary. Bratak, though injured, refused immediate treatment, insisting on speaking with General Hammond first. The Doomslayer walked down the ramp under his own power, a walking monument of devastation. Chunks of armor were missing, revealing the scarred, synth muscle weave beneath. One leg dragged slightly, a servo glitching. The cracked lens of his helmet made his remaining green optic look like a baleful star glimpsed through a broken window. He carried with him the smell of ozone, scorched metal, and something colder, more alien, the residual scent of a consciousness unmade. The SF guards didn't just stare this time, they recoiled. There was a new quality to his presence, an aura that went beyond physical threat. It was the quiet after an extinction-level event. General Hammond met them in the gate room, his face grave. "Report, Colonel." O'Neill took off his cap, running a hand through his hair. "Sir, the Dakara superweapon is destroyed. Anubis is gone, permanently. The Jaffa prisoners are freed." He glanced at the Slayer, who stood motionless, a pillar of silent ruin. The Slayer handled the main event. Hammond's eyes followed the glance. "I can see that. Medical assessment?" Carter stepped forward, her own exhaustion evident. "Sir, his armor is severely compromised, and I'm detecting unstable energy readings from from him. What he did to Anubis wasn't just physical. I recommend immediate isolation in a secure lab for observation and attempted repair." "Denied," Hammond said firmly. "He is not a specimen. He is an ally who has just saved Earth from an existential threat. Prepare Lab 3, clean it out, make it a temporary quarters. Give him whatever tools or materials Major Carter thinks might help with self-repair. Post a security detail outside, but no one enters without his explicit permission or my direct order." "Sir," Carter began, "the energy signatures are his business, Major. Unless they pose a direct threat to this base, we will respect his autonomy." Hammond approached the Slayer, stopping at a respectful distance. "On behalf of Earth, you have our thanks. You have our support. Rest, recover. We will speak when you are ready." The Slayer's helmet tilted a fraction in acknowledgement. He followed a nervous airman out of the gate room, his heavy, limping footsteps echoing down the corridor. Lab 3 was a sterile, white room, usually used for analyzing alien artifacts. It had been cleared, leaving only a reinforced workbench and a power coupling Carter had rigged to an Aquata generator. The Slayer stood in the center, alone. He finally allowed the Praetor Suit to fully power down with a series of deep, mechanical sighs. The armor unlocked, and he stepped out of the shell. The man inside was a map of scars and augmented tissue, his body a testament to endless war. He was bare to the waist, his skin pale where it wasn't cross-hatched with old wounds or inked with faint, glowing runes that pulsed with a dim, green light, the physical markings of the divinity machine. His face was stern, etched with permanent rage, his eyes holding a depth of violence that no human countenance should contain. He placed his hands on the dormant armor. The self-repair systems were inert, starved. He closed his eyes and reached inward, to the place where he had devoured Anubis's essence. It was still there, a trapped, shrieking knot of ascended energy. fighting against the walls of his will. He didn't try to communicate with it. He didn't care about its promises or its threats. He began to crush it, not to destroy it, but to process it, to grind it down from a sentient scream into raw, usable power. Tendrils of blue-white energy, faint and reluctant, seeped from his fingertips into the Praetor Suit. The armor stirred. Nanites, dormant for lack of fuel, activated. They began crawling over the damage, knitting composite, re-spinning energy weave, sealing breaches. It was a blasphemous fuel source, the soul stuff of a false god being used to patch the armor of its killer. But it worked. As the armor repaired, the Slayer's mind worked on a different problem: the data. During the infiltration of the SGC network, he had downloaded terabytes of information: Stargate addresses, Goa'uld force deployments, system lord hierarchies, known world populations. He processed it all with a strategist's cold mind, overlaying it with the tactical instincts honed in hell. Anubis was the greatest threat, but he was also a unifier. His ambition and power had kept other system lords like Baal, Yu, and Kaylee in a tense, paranoid alliance. With him gone, that alliance would shatter. They would turn on each other, fighting over his territories, his technologies, his remnants. It was the perfect time for a purge, a systematic, galaxy-wide cleansing. A soft chime at the door. His armor was only half repaired, but he stepped back into it, the plates sealing around him with a series of solid clunks. The helmet hissed as it locked, the single green optic flaring to life. Enter. The door slid open. It was Teal'c. He carried no weapon, only a small datapad. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "May I speak with you?" The Slayer gave a single nod. Teal'c entered, the door shutting behind him. He didn't speak for a moment, his eyes taking in the partially regenerated armor, the tools of war laid out on the bench. "What you did on Dakara, it was a thing of legend, but it was also a thing of terror." He met the Slayer's optic. The Jaffa rebellion is preparing to move. Bratak believes we have a window of opportunity to rally dozens of worlds, to turn Anubis's death into a galaxy-wide uprising. He wishes for your support. The Slayer was silent. "He sees you as a symbol," Teal'c continued. "A god-killer. To the enslaved Jaffa, that is more powerful than any fleet. Your presence alone on a battlefield could shatter the morale of a Goa'uld army." He paused. "But I have fought beside you. I have seen you fight. You do not seek to liberate, you seek to exterminate." Finally, the Slayer's distorted voice grated out. "The parasite is the disease. The host is the symptom. The hosts are my people," Teal'c said, his voice low and intense. "They are fathers, mothers, children. They are slaves, their wills suppressed but not destroyed. Your method, total annihilation, would kill billions of innocents. It would make you no better than the Goa'uld." The Slayer turned his helmet to look directly at Teal'c. "Your symbiote. It is a tool, one I use to fight the very system that created it. It is a demon, a lesser one, tamed, for now." Teal'c stiffened. "I control it. It does not control me. It lives. While demons live, they plot. They corrupt." The Slayer took a step forward, his presence filling the room. "You ask me to fight your war, to spare the infected, to leave the rot in the tree because you have learned to live with the worms. I ask you to fight a smarter war." Teal'c's composure cracked, showing the fervor of the revolutionary beneath. "Cut off the head, and the body can be saved. Destroy the system lords, free the Jaffa, and the symbiotes will die with time. There is a future for my people that does not require their genocide. The two warriors stood facing each other, a gulf of philosophy between them as vast as the space between galaxies. One fought for redemption, for freedom. The other fought for purity, for absolute cessation. "I will hunt the system, lords," the Slayer stated, his tone final. "I will break their ships. I will burn their temples. If your people stand in my way, they will die. If they flee, they will live. My target is the parasite, not its cattle." It was as much concession as he would ever give. Teal'c absorbed this, then bowed his head. It was not a bow of agreement, but of understanding. "Then we are allies of circumstance. But know this, Slayer. If the day comes when you turn your weapons on a world of freed Jaffa, I will stand against you, as will the Tauri." The Slayer gave no response. The warning was noted and dismissed. He would do what needed to be done. Alliances were temporary. The mission was eternal. After Teal'c left, the Slayer returned to his repairs. Hours passed. The armor was at 78% functionality when the base-wide alarm sounded again. This time, it was not for an off-world activation. It was a tactical alert. In the briefing room, the mood was tense. Hammond, O'Neill, Carter, Daniel, and Teal'c were gathered around the table, a star map projected above it. 20 minutes ago, we detected a massive hyperspace flux near the edge of the solar system, Carter explained, pointing to a cluster of red icons. Multiple capital ship signatures. They're not approaching Earth directly. They're gathering here, near Jupiter. "Who?" Hammond demanded. "It's a mixed fleet, sir. We're identifying Hattaks from the flags of Baal, Yu, and Kali. At least a dozen motherships, plus support vessels." "They're uniting," Daniel said, his face pale. "Anubis is gone, and instead of fighting each other, they're banding together. They saw what happened at Dakara. They're scared." "They should be," O'Neill muttered. "They're not here for a negotiation," Teal'c said grimly. "They have come to eliminate the threat before it comes for them. They will bombard Earth from a distance, destroying the Stargate and everything around it to ensure the Slayer is neutralized." "Can our orbital defenses hold?" Hammond asked Carter. "Against one or two Hattaks, maybe, sir. Against a fleet of this size? No. They'll overwhelm us in minutes." The door to the briefing room hissed open. The Doom Slayer stood there, fully armored, his repairs visibly incomplete but functional. The green optic swept the room, landing on the star map. He understood instantly. "They are here for me." His voice was a statement of fact. "Looks that way," O'Neill said. "They've decided you're bad for business, so they're going to blow up the whole store." The Slayer walked to the star map, studying the fleet dispositions. "They are afraid. They cluster together for strength." A low mechanical growl emanated from his helmet. A weakness. "What's your plan, son?" Hammond asked. The Slayer turned to Carter. "Your ship, the one being built, is it functional?" Carter blinked. "The X-303? The Prometheus? It's in early space trials, but its weapon systems are untested, its shields. Does it fly?" "Yes, but I require transportation." A stunned silence fell over the room. "You want to take the Prometheus?" O'Neill asked, incredulous. "To fight a dozen Hattaks? With a crew that's never seen combat?" "No." The Slayer's optic glowed fiercely. "I require transportation to the fleet. One ship, one warrior." The meaning sank in. He wasn't proposing a naval battle. He was proposing a boarding action on a galactic scale. "You can't be serious," Daniel breathed. "You'll be killed before you get within 1,000 miles of the lead ship." "Their fear is a weapon," the Slayer stated. "They expect an army, a fleet. They expect a battle. I will give them a nightmare." He looked at Hammond. "Send a transmission to the fleet. Tell them I am coming. Tell them to prepare." Hammond stared at him, then slowly nodded. He saw the same thing Teal'c had seen, the strategic value of absolute focused terror. "Colonel Major, prep the Prometheus for immediate launch. Get him to that fleet." "Sir," Carter said, her scientific mind battling the sheer audacity of the plan. "Even if we get him close, the moment he leaves the ship, he'll be in vacuum, under fire from a dozen capital ships." The Slayer raised his arm. On his wrist, a device glowed. A smaller, more refined version of the teleporter he'd used on the Hatak. "I will not be in vacuum for long." He had learned. He had adapted. He had taken the principles of the Goa'uld ring transporter and the Asgard beam technology from the SGC database, and his suit had synthesized a personal, short-range teleporter, a hellport for one. The plan was insane. It was suicidal. It was exactly what he did best. 2 hours later, the Prometheus, Earth's first interstellar battlecruiser, rose from its secret silo and shot into the blackness of space. On its bridge, Colonel O'Neill and Major Carter oversaw a skeleton crew of the best they had. In the main hangar bay, standing alone before the massive airlock doors, was the Doom Slayer. His armor was at 89% functionality. His weapons were charged. The essence of Anubis was now a quiet, burning coal in his core, fueling the final repairs, feeding the rage. On the main viewer, the Goa'uld fleet appeared, a cluster of golden pyramids against the immense backdrop of Jupiter. They were arrayed in a defensive sphere, their shields overlapping, their weapons tracking the approaching human vessel. A hailing frequency opened. The sneering, multiplied face of Baal appeared on the screen, his image mirrored across the command thrones of the other system lords. "Tauri vessel, you have brought us the demon. A wise surrender. Hand him over, and we may spare your pathetic world." O'Neill leaned into the comm. "Yeah, see, here's the thing. He's not really the handover type, more of the come-and-get-it kind of guy." Baal's sneer faded. "Then you will die with him." The Slayer's voice cut across the channel, deep and final. "I am not on their ship." On every view screen in every Goa'uld command center, a single green optic filled the display, sourced from a transmission originating inside the fleet's sensor net. "I am already here." The transmission showed a flash of golden light in the main hangar of Baal's flagship, then static. On the Prometheus, Carter checked her sensors, her blood running cold. "He's gone. The personal teleporter. He used our approach as a cover to calculate the coordinates. He's aboard the lead Hatak." O'Neill watched the Goa'uld fleet, already seeing the first signs of panic as ships broke formation, turning their weapons inward, afraid of where he might appear next. "Well," O'Neill said quietly, "let's get some popcorn. This is going to be one hell of a show." In the belly of the beast, surrounded by the combined might of the system lords, the Doomslayer ignited the crucible. The hunt was back on. The hangar bay of Baal's flagship, the Scepter of Ra, was a cavern of polished gold and glowing crystal, large enough to house a squadron of death gliders. At its center, the ring transporter platform shimmered with fading gold light, revealing its lone passenger. The Doomslayer stood amidst the grandeur, a stain of matte green and battered metal on a canvas of ostentatious divinity. For a heartbeat, there was perfect silence, as a dozen Jaffa maintenance workers froze, their tools hanging in midair. Then the alarms began, a chorus of wailing, alien sirens. The Slayer didn't give them time to react. The super shotgun was in his hands before the first siren reached its peak. The blast tore through 2 Jaffa at a console, painting the gold walls with a visceral, shocking red. The message was sent. The execution had begun. He moved with purpose, not towards the exits, but deeper into the ship, following the schematics he'd stolen from the SGC database and cross-referenced with his own sensor sweep. He wasn't here to get to the bridge. He was here to get to the reactor, to turn this golden dagger aimed at Earth into the opening salvo of his galactic war. The Jaffa Guard response was swift. Squads in full armor poured into the hangar from multiple access points, staff weapons blazing. Plasma bolts filled the air, ricocheting off the hull of a parked death glider, scorching the deck. The Slayer used the glider for cover, his visor calculating trajectories. He switched to the plasma rifle, its rapid-fire green bolts cutting down the front ranks with efficient brutality. When a group tried to flank him, he lobbed a frag grenade into their midst. The explosion was satisfyingly destructive in the enclosed space. He was not the unstoppable force of Dakara here. His armor was still damaged, his systems not at full capacity. A staff bolt struck his left shoulder, and he felt the impact through the plating, a reminder of his vulnerability. He responded by charging the shooter, grabbing the Jaffa's helmet, and crushing it against a bulkhead before absorbing the faint pulse of life force. The glory kill mechanic still functioned, a grotesque parody of healing in this universe of flesh and blood. He fought his way to a main corridor, a wide, processional avenue lined with statues of Goa'uld gods. It was crawling with Jaffa, fortified behind portable energy barriers. They had learned. They were adapting. The Slayer adapted faster. He activated the new teleporter on his wrist. With a gut-wrenching lurch of displaced reality, he vanished from the corridor and reappeared 20 meters behind the Jaffa barricade, in their midst. The crucible flared to life, and for 3 seconds, it was not a battle, but a harvest. He carved through them before they could turn, leaving a path of dismembered corpses and shattered armor. The violence was a means to an end. Every dead Jaffa was a delay, a distraction. His goal was the deep, throbbing hum he could feel through the deck plates, the Naquata reactor, the heart of the ship. On the bridge of the Scepter of Ra, Baal watched the carnage on security feeds with a cold, calculating fury. The other system lords, Yu and Kali, were linked via hologram, their faces tight with fear and outrage. "He is one being," Kaylee snarled, her serpentine features contorted. "How can he move through our ship as if it were his own?" "He is utilizing a personal transporter of unknown design," Yu said, his ancient voice strained. "Our internal sensors cannot lock onto him. He is a ghost." "He is a demon," as the report said. Baal murmured, his eyes fixed on the screen showing the Slayer ripping the door off a security vault. "And he is not heading for the bridge. He is heading for engineering?" "Then flood the lower decks with nerve gas. Vent the sections to space," Kaylee shouted. "And lose half my crew and all power to the shields?" Baal shot back. "No, he wants the reactor. He intends to scuttle the ship from within. A suicide attack." "He does not strike me as one who dies easily," Yu warned. Baal made a decision. Seal the main reactor chamber, activate every internal defense between his position and the core, and ready my personal teltalk. We will transfer my flag to Yu's vessel. The holograms flickered with surprise. "You would abandon your flagship?" Kaylee asked. "I would preserve my life to fight another day," Baal said smoothly, already rising from his throne. "Let the demon have this hollow victory. He will be trapped in a dying ship, and we will obliterate the debris from a safe distance. The point is made. He can be contained. He can be killed." It was a pragmatic, cowardly, and typically Goa'uld solution. Deep in the bowels of the ship, the Slayer felt the change. Bulkheads of reinforced Naquata alloy slammed down ahead of and behind him, sealing him in a long corridor. Ceiling panels slid open, revealing the muzzles of automated staff cannons. The air began to shimmer with a containment field, a potent energy net designed to hold even a raging cool warrior. He was trapped. The cannons opened fire, a storm of plasma that filled the corridor with searing heat and light. The Praetor Suit's shields, still weakened, shrieked in protest, dropping rapidly. He crouched, using the limited cover of a structural support beam. But the fire was coming from all angles. His armor began to scorch, plates heating to dangerous levels. This was the difference between fighting in an open fortress and within the perfected kill zone of a warship. Here, the environment itself was the enemy. His HUD flashed a warning. Shield failure imminent. He had seconds. His eyes fell on the deck plating beneath his feet. His sensors, piercing through the cosmetic gold layer, detected a maintenance conduit below, a narrow access shaft for power cabling. It was a tight fit, even for him. As the containment field solidified around him, crackling with energy, he aimed the ballista at the deck and fired a fully charged, destabilizing shot directly at his feet. The explosion tore through the plating, sending molten metal and decking flying. The force knocked him backwards, but also collapsed the corridor's flooring. He fell through the smoking hole, dropping 10 feet into the narrow, pitch-black conduit below, just as the containment field sealed the space he had occupied. He landed hard in the cramped shaft, cables and coolant pipes snaking around him. Above, he could hear the automated cannons still firing into the empty corridor. He was off their grid. The conduit led downward, toward the deep, resonant thrum of the reactor. He began to crawl, his armored shoulders scraping against the walls, following the flow of power like a shark following blood in the water. On the Prometheus, Carter watched the sensor data, her face pale. The lead, Hatak's internal energy signatures are spiking erratically. They've sealed multiple sections. I think they've trapped him. O'Neill gripped the back of her chair. Can we get a lock on him? Beam him out? His personal teleporter is creating too much interference, and the Hatak's shields are still up. We can't get a beam through. She looked up, a new reading catching her eye. Sir, another ship is detaching from the flagship. It's a small Goa'uld transport. It's heading for Yu's mothership. They're bugging out, O'Neill realized. The snakes are leaving him to die in a box. On the viewer, the massive Goa'uld fleet began to reposition, shifting to bring their primary weapons to bear not on Earth, not on the Prometheus, but on Baal's own flagship. They're going to destroy it, Teal'c said, his voice heavy. To ensure his death, they will sacrifice the ship and all aboard. Then we make sure that doesn't happen, O'Neill snapped. Carter, plot an intercept course for that transport. If we can grab Baal, we might have a bargaining chip, and keep trying to get a lock on the Slayer. The Slayer emerged from the conduit into the secondary reactor chamber. A vast, cathedral-like space dominated by the towering, cylindrical form of the Naquata reactor core. It glowed with a sickly green light, pulsing like a malignant heart. The chamber was eerily empty, evacuated on Baal's orders, sealed behind 3-foot-thick blast doors. He was in the belly of the beast, and the beast was about to be killed from the outside. His external sensors, piercing the hull, detected the power buildup in a dozen distant ships. They were charging their main weapons. The tactical reality was clear. The system lords had decided the scepter of Ra was expendable. They were going to vaporize it, and him with it. He walked to the main reactor console, a complex array of glowing crystals and hieroglyphs. He didn't understand the language. He didn't need to. He understood power systems. He placed his gauntlet on the main interface, and his suit's hacking protocols went to work, brute forcing past the security with sheer processing power. He wasn't trying to shut it down. He was trying to overload it, but not just to explode. An Aquata reactor explosion would be spectacular, but it would only destroy this ship. His goal was larger. He reconfigured the overload sequence, routing auxiliary power from the ship's engines, its weapons, its life support, everything, into the reactor's containment field. He was not weakening the containment. He was strengthening it to absurd, unsustainable levels, turning the entire ship into a single, massive, unstable capacitor. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, a final, desperate keen. On the bridge of Yu's mothership, where Goa'uld now stood, a technician turned, his face ashen. "My lords, the flagship's reactor is spiking beyond all safety parameters. But the containment field is intensifying. He is not trying to make it explode. He is trying to make it implode." "What does that mean?" Kaylee demanded. "It means," Yu said, his ancient eyes widening in horror, "he is creating a gravitational singularity, a temporary black hole fueled by Naquata." On the Prometheus, Carter's sensors screamed, "Oh my God." The mass readings from the Hatak are becoming impossibly dense. He's triggering a localized collapse event. "Will it swallow the fleet?" O'Neill asked urgently. "It's small scale, but the gravitational shear alone at that range." Carter's hands flew over her console. "Prometheus, all power to engines. Get us out of here. Maximum retreat." In the reactor chamber, the air began to warp. Loose tools and debris lifted from the floor, spiraling toward the glowing core, which was now collapsing in on itself, the light being sucked into a point of infinite darkness. The very metal of the chamber groaned, straining inward. The Slayer stood before the maelstrom, his armor's magnetic locks holding him to the deck. He watched his handiwork. This was not a weapon from his universe, but it would do. It was a statement, a warning written in the fabric of space-time itself. He activated his wrist teleporter one last time. But he wasn't targeting the Prometheus. He was targeting the small, fleeing Goa'uld transport, Goa'uld's escape pod. The coordinates had been easy to extrapolate from the ship's own launch logs. As the singularity reached its critical point, as the scepter of Ra began to crumple like paper in a fist, the Slayer vanished in a flash of argent energy. He reappeared in the cramped cockpit of Goa'uld's Teltak. The System Lord was alone, piloting the craft manually, a look of relieved triumph on his face as he watched his dying flagship on the view screen. That triumph died when a gauntleted hand closed around his throat from behind. Goa'uld gagged, his hands leaving the controls. The transport veered off course. On the main screen, the view of the flagship was replaced by the sight of the other Goa'uld motherships, their weapons firing, brilliant lances of plasma, streaking toward the collapsing vessel. Then the singularity achieved full collapse. There was no sound in the vacuum of space, but on every sensor screen for 1,000,000 miles, there was a flash of impossible darkness, a hole punched in reality. The Hatak vanished, consumed. The incoming staff cannon fire bent and spiraled into the pinprick blackness. Then the singularity, unstable and small, evaporated in a burst of hawking radiation that washed over the nearby fleet like a tidal wave of hard light and scrambled particles. Shields on the closest Hataks failed. Hulls were scorched. Systems went offline. The perfect formation shattered into chaos. In the Teltak, Goa'uld struggled weakly in the Slayer's grip. You are madness, incarnate." The Slayer pulled him close, his single green optic filling Goa'uld's vision. "Your empire is a nest. I am the fire." He didn't kill him, not yet. He dragged the stunned System Lord to the transport's ring platform. He dialed a code, the address for the SGC, pulled from the ship's stolen database. Golden light enveloped them. They reappeared in the SGC gate room, the Slayer holding a choking, terrified Goa'uld by the neck. SF soldiers surged forward, weapons raised. O'Neill's voice came over the loudspeaker from the Prometheus, still en route back. "What the hell? Is that—" "The parasite Goa'uld." The Slayer's voice boomed through his helmet speakers, audible to everyone in the room. He threw the Goa'uld to the floor at General Hammond's feet. A trophy and a message. He turned to face the active Stargate, its blue event horizon still shimmering from their arrival. He raised his voice, knowing the Goa'uld had ways of monitoring the gate network. "The hunt begins now. You hid behind gods and gold and armies. You have no gods left. Your gold will melt. Your armies will break." He took a step toward the gate, then paused, looking back at Hammond, at the stunned SGC personnel, at Teal'c and the others who had just returned. "My war is with the parasite, not with humanity, not with free Jaffa. Stand aside and you will live. Stand in my way." He let the threat hang, the memory of the artificial black hole fresh in all their minds. He turned and walked into the Stargate, disappearing into the blue. In the gate room, silence reigned, broken only by Goa'uld's ragged coughing. The galactic order had been shattered. A force of nature had been unleashed. And it was just getting started. The screen on the wall flickered, showing the deep space sensor feed. The remaining Goa'uld fleet, leaderless and damaged, was retreating into hyperspace, not in formation, but in a frantic, disorganized scramble. Teal'c looked from the gate to the retreating fleet, then to the cowering system lord on the floor. "The age of the false gods," he said quietly, "is over. A new age had begun, an age of fire and slayer." The aftermath of Dakara and the destruction of the scepter of Ra sent shockwaves through the galaxy that would resonate for generations. In the corridors of the SGC, the mood was one of victory tempered by profound unease. They had been saved from annihilation, yes, but by what? The Doomslayer was gone. The Stargate had been set to a random address, its destination untraceable. He had left behind a broken Goa'uld empire, a captured system lord, and a galaxy struggling to comprehend the new, terrifying rules of power. He had not sought gratitude, nor alliance, nor a place in their new order. He had simply completed his immediate objective and moved on, a primeval force following the scent of prey. On Earth, the debate raged in secret councils. Some saw him as the ultimate weapon, a deterrent that could guarantee human safety for a century. Others saw a rogue asteroid on a collision course with civilization itself, impossible to control, devastating when it finally struck. General Hammond held the middle ground, authorizing the study of the technology he'd left behind in his wake. Scans of his armor, energy readings from his weapons, the shattered remnants of Kull warriors, while quietly preparing contingencies for the day he might turn his gaze back toward Earth. Among the Jaffa, the legend spread like supernova. The God Killer, the Unchained. To the enslaved, he was a symbol of hope so potent it bordered on religion. To the rebels like Bratak, he was a catalyst, a shock to the system that had created the largest power vacuum in Goa'uld history. With Anubis gone and Baal a prisoner, the remaining system lords fractured into 100 squabbling factions. The Jaffa rebellion found its moment, and worlds began to fall not to conquest, but to liberation. But Teal'c, who had looked into the single green lens and seen the abyss within, carried a quieter truth. The Slayer was not a liberator. He was an exterminator. He had granted them this chance not out of compassion for the Jaffa, but out of contempt for their masters. He had drawn a line, not between slave and master, but between parasite and host. And Teal'c knew, with cold certainty, that the line did not care about redemption or choice or the symbiote he carried in his own belly. The galaxy had been introduced to a new fundamental law. Some forces cannot be bargained with. They cannot be understood through diplomacy or met with proportional response. They can only be survived or avoided. The system lords, in their arrogance, had summoned a demon to fight their wars. They had learned too late that demons do not take sides. They only take souls. As the Stargate shut down, sealing the path the Slayer had taken, the Milky Way seemed both larger and smaller. Larger for the infinite threats lurking in unseen dimensions. Smaller for the knowledge that one being, alone and angry, could shake its very foundations. He was out there now, hunting. The coordinates of every Goa'uld stronghold were in his database. Every Hatak signature was logged. Every world that bowed to a false god was a waypoint on his crusade. His war was not for territory or politics. It was cosmology. It was the assertion that in a universe teeming with parasites pretending to be divine, there would always be a sharp, final answer. And that answer was coming.